Okay.
All right, let's get going. This is our preview for the Power Five programs plus Notre Dame. So good to talk to you again after that 2 hour group of five show we did yesterday, Mark.
We're going to see if we can get this one in under the 2 hour wire here today, Greg, but we'll see because a lot of good stuff to talk about, especially when it involves the Power Five.
Yeah, you know what? We might as well start with Notre Dame. It's because it's the only team that we're going to cover out of the independents, and and they really should be discussed with the Power Five teams because we know that it's inevitable with all these conferences. I know nothing has been set, but they're going somewhere. What do you think? It's the ACC or the Big Ten?
Well, it's going to be whoever comes up with the biggest offer to them, unquestionably, because I've been to Notre Dame quite a few times. A good friend of mine lived there, and I went to a few Notre Dame football games and walked the campus. It's all about the money at South Bend.
Yeah.
All about the money. I mean, they control the whole town, the whole city, where you can park, when you can park, and all those types of things. So what it comes down to, the bottom line is money when Notre Dame is involved. So whoever comes up with the biggest package, right now probably the Big Ten because they're talking $1 billion package in the making, and that would probably also geographically fit the situation the best as well.
Yeah, I wonder if they would. That means they would move their basketball team, Big Ten as well. Probably.
Probably
I
so,
think so.
right?
All right. So anyway, Marcus Freeman takes over. And look, Brian Kelly did such an underrated job at Notre Dame. I don't think a lot of people understand what kind of a great job Brian Kelly did at Notre Dame because he didn't win any championships. And Notre Dame, when we were growing up, it's about winning championships. Uh, but he did a tremendous job. And I think, look, he saw the writing on the wall. I went as far as I can go. I don't think I can get the team over the hump. You know, with the restrictions we have here, I just don't think I can get it done. Whatever the case may be, I think they can. Yes, if they have a right quarterback, or if they have a couple more players, or a couple more breaks here and there, maybe. But bottom line is, he's gone, and we'll talk about him when we talk about LSU. Marcus Freeman gets the gig, and this could be a very interesting hire.
It could well be just that. Brian Kelly, we knew he was going. He had lipstick on his collar. He was being wooed by LSU. Maybe we didn't all realize that, but the money just he couldn't say no to. The fact of the matter is, coming into the situation here right now, Marcus Freeman has got some big, big shoes to fill, as you mentioned here. The job that Kelly did at Notre Dame was nothing short of miraculous, for especially for a team that takes on as difficult a schedule as they do each and every year. He had them in the playoffs. They were always involved in the playoff picture. You talk about the playoffs and the Big Four. Notre Dame made it the Fab Five, if you will. So now, what can Freeman do here to fulfill those shoes? Well, it may be a little bit of a reach for Freeman because he's never been a head coach before, and you're doing it at a big power university like Notre Dame. But they went with the guy that brought all the talent into Notre Dame while Kelly was there. He was their ace number one recruiter, was Freeman. He knows the players, and he'll get the job done at least from a recruitment standpoint. So it's going to largely depend upon his coaching staff and the people that he surrounds himself with.
Yeah, and we know that defense will be his trademark. That's his side of the ball. There's still going to be good players back on defense. So I think they're going to be just as good on the defensive side of the ball. And I think over the last couple of years, they've had a good enough defense to win a national championship. It's the offense. The offense just hasn't been explosive enough. And I don't know if that's going to change this year. I just don't. I mean, especially now they're going to bring in a new quarterback. But I guess that's actually a good thing because, the Cones of the world and who was the one before that got, who was the kid that was before Cone that was there for a while?
The Notre Dame quarterback, it escapes me because
Yeah.
they've had so many, and
And
they just
that's it. They're
plug
just
and play.
another guy. Yeah. But
Right.
he was there for like 3 years or so, and it's just another guy. They don't have that special quarterback. So I don't know if they have that because nobody knows. These are young quarterbacks now. They didn't go out in the transfer portal and bring any star quarterbacks in here. So that's the big question mark. And you talk about schedule at Ohio State to open up the season. So, yeah, okay. And then they also got to play BYU in Vegas. They play Clemson at home again. That's becoming an every year kind of thing. And then at the end of the season at USC. So they have like 4 prime opponents on their schedule. And the rest of them, are like you said, are still not cupcakes, but they should win, including California, North Carolina, and such. I don't know. Maybe they win. I don't know. Maybe they could. I don't know if they can win 2 out of 4 out of that schedule. Maybe they can.
Well, if you take a look at the Irish here, they're not going to be backing down from anybody. There's no question about that. And they have had, on paper at least, a good enough offense and a good enough defense to compete. Look at what they've done the last 4 years. They've scored more than 30 points a game each and every year. They've gained more than 425 yards each and every year, and their defense is adequate. So everything has been there for them. As you mentioned, they just can't get over the hump. And for them to make it to the college football playoff here, they're going to have to go in there with only one loss because they don't have a conference affiliate. They can't play into a conference championship game. So who will that one loss be? Will it be Ohio State? Will it be Southern Cal, both on the road? Will it be Clemson at home? BYU is going to be a real tricky football game for them. That game's in Vegas, and it's going to be a big BYU crowd there. No question about that. So I don't think this football team makes it to the college football playoff this year for that reason, because the schedule's awfully tough.
Yeah.
And also because there's these big shoes, as we mentioned here, about Marcus Framing having to fill this particular year. I see a slip in BYU, or I should say Notre Dame this year. I think 9 wins is probably going to be what they'll top out at.
Yeah, because really, there's going to be a lot of emotion. How long will that emotion with the new coach? How long will that go? And it could disappear immediately because they have to open the season against Ohio State. And if they get beat up in their first game, well, who knows what happens the rest of the season? They're not beating Ohio State. Okay, that's just not going to happen. I'd be shocked. Everybody would be shocked if they went on Ohio State and beat Ohio State. If they can do that, they will have a realistic, excellent chance to get to the playoffs. But let's just say that's the loss. That means they're going to have to beat BYU, they're going to have to beat Clemson, and they're going to have to beat USC. Those are things that can happen as long as they're a really good football team. Once again, they have to get really good quarterback play from a quarterback that has no experience. So we'll see. You never know. It's college. You never know when these really star players pop up out of nowhere.
You never know what happens in matchups like Ohio State and Notre Dame. If Notre Dame goes into the horseshoe and pulls the upset, look up and down their schedule here. It's conceivable Notre Dame could be favored in every game the rest of the season.
If they beat Ohio State, yeah.
Yes, they would. Yeah, exactly. That means at home against Clemson, which, that game's going to probably be just about there like that. And then at Southern Cal, depending upon what happens to the Trojans and Notre Dame along the way. So that first game for them for this football season, for Marcus Freeman, for the Irish, means a lot. I don't know how they'll fare in the football game, but that's the game that everything will key off of when they visit Ohio State.
Okay, let's talk SEC football, and of course, 2 divisions. And we start with the East. I know most of the time we would start with the West because that's the best division. But Georgia, they're the defending champs. So we start with Georgia and the Bulldogs, Kirby Smart. A couple of things regarding last year, and we talked about it a lot when we were going over the whole playoffs every week and how everything went down. That first of all, let's talk on the good side for Georgia. Let's get on their bandwagon here. They could have folded. They had the undefeated season. They were everything. Oh, it's Georgia, and then they lose to Alabama. Here they go again. There's no way mentally they could come back and win in the playoffs after that loss. It's over. So we give them a lot of credit. They were able to do it. They broke the wall, broke down the wall finally. And now with all this great recruiting, Kirby Smart has been able to produce at Georgia. Maybe this is just the beginning of an Alabama type of dynasty. Okay, now let's take a look at the other side. The other side is, as a fan, here we go again. You got a team, they lose a game against a team, and then because it's the mighty SEC, they get a replay. They get to go and play them again. And of course, when they play them again, that team is completely banged up. All of their players, or the key players, are like not even available except the quarterback. And of course, when you get to play a team a second time when you're that evenly matched up and the other team's got all the injuries, it's going to be hard for that team to beat you a second time. So, okay, but realistically, it doesn't matter how it all went down. Georgia won, and they now will be able to walk proudly. And hey, we're now the big dogs. So whether they can do it again this year, I actually doubt it. I think they're going to be strong as usual. But look, they just lost so much talent on defense last year. So much talent. And offensively, they should be fine. They should be just as good, a matter of fact, on offense because they got so many explosive players. But it's that side of the defense that I don't know. I could see them, of course, maybe making the playoffs again, but it's so hard to win back to back national championships. Alabama doesn't do it very often, if at all. What did they do it once? Did they do it once? Saban? Back to back?
I believe he did it once, yes.
So even he only did it, I think, once. So I don't think they're going to do it again, but they're going to have a very good year as usual.
Well, I think the trump card that Kirby Smart can play this football season. You mentioned he's depleted as far as the defense is concerned. They were just rated their defense in the NFL football draft. That spoke of how well they were. One of the all-time best defenses, perhaps ever in college football. Ever in college football. So they got rated, and now they have to start anew there that way. But if you take a look at what happened last year, Kirby Smart knew he plays and coaches like his name. He's very, very smart, and he knows what he's doing here. He started 49% of his starts were by underclassmen last year. So he realized that he's going to be losing a boatload of players, and he gained a lot of experience for these kids coming back. So
that's how they did it. That's how they do it at Alabama.
That's exactly right. They just plug and play because they recruit so well. Yeah. They've only got 10 of their 22 starters back due to the Georgia Bulldogs, but that doesn't worry him a lick. Again, we talked about defensively. If you took the returning experience, they rank 122nd in the country because of the depletion of that staunch defense. But again, when you win a national championship, and I'm going to use this phrase, which we used a lot when we did our Group of Five conference previews yesterday, in fact, they are the hunted right now.
Yep.
Okay, they are the hunted. They're assuming a whole new role this football season here. Every game on their schedule is going to be the number one game for every opponent. The teams they knocked off last year are going to be double incentivized to take on the Georgia Bulldogs. And they also read the press clippings in the offseason. We said their team theme this year in the Playbook magazine was too much bubbly. You can sometimes let the press fill your head with all the wrong things and all the wrong thoughts, okay? And that could be well the case for the Georgia Bulldogs this year. It's just practically impossible to repeat, and especially when your defense was rated like it is. I got to see Georgia taking a step back this year.
Yeah, the offensive players, they're going to be the ones to really look out for because we don't know about this Eric Gilbert kid. I mean, he was supposed to be the mega star. He's going to be a top 5 draft pick when he comes out, and he hasn't been able to really get on the field much. But now, supposedly, this is his season. He's going to break out, and Brock Bowers is there too. I mean, Brock Bowers is going to be a first-round draft pick. So you got 2 first-round draft pick tight ends. Now, they don't have any explosive receivers, though. They lost, their top guy Pickens last year and a couple other guys. They have talent, but they lost a little bit there. Quarterback return, so that's huge. But defensively, they do have a few star players. Nolan Smith, in my mind, could actually be. I think he's going to be. See, I didn't really know Dean was going to get passed by that much in the draft because of his size. But Nolan Smith won't. Nolan Smith is without a doubt in my mind, and I knew it even before coming into last year. He's the best linebacker on that team out of those 2. And if you think Dean was a really good college linebacker, I mean, Nolan Smith is going to impress you again this year. So he's going to be a big part of that defense, and the schedule is going to be a lot more difficult as well, Mark, because they open up in Atlanta with Oregon. So it's like a home game, but Oregon with Lanning is kind of cool, so that should be interesting. If anybody knows Georgia, it's Lanning. But the other thing that is interesting is the fact that they have to go on the road a lot now this year. So at South Carolina, the neutral site against Florida, at Mississippi State, at Kentucky. So these are so there are some road potential pitfalls there. Keeping in mind, they also have to play Tennessee at home, Auburn at home. It's a usual tough SEC schedule. I don't know exactly where they lose, but if they do slip up once, probably ain't going to matter. They'll still be invited to the playoffs.
All 6 of their games away from Athens are against teams that were in bowl games last year. As you mentioned, a salty road schedule here. That's not going to bode well that way, at least on paper anyway, for the
Yeah.
Georgia Bulldogs. And you mentioned about plugging players in. They had done arguably the best job of recruiting the last 4 years. It's Alabama, Georgia, Alabama, Georgia. The last 4 years, Georgia owns the number one top ranked recruiting class 2 times. So it means that they're ready to plug and they're ready to play. So will there be that big of a drop off? Not likely. Okay. My biggest concern here is I am not a big Stetson Bennett fan.
Yeah.
I know he got the job done last year. I know he will not be playing in the National Football League. Can he do it 2 years in a row? That's the biggest question to me.
And the guy who was responsible for a lot of that recruiting will be on the sidelines in that first game when Oregon
Lanning,
takes on Georgia. So
Dan Lanning, yes.
that could dictate Georgia's season, because if they lose that first game, they're gonna have to run the table to make the playoffs, and that will not be easy because that also includes the SEC championship game. That they'd have to, because they don't play Alabama in the regular season, but they might have to play them in the championship game. All right, sticking in this division, and I really like the way the rest of this division is slowly. They're going to be a little bit better than last year. So Georgia was just so much better than everybody last year. It's not going to be the case this year because Georgia lost the talent we talked about. So they're going to come back a little bit, but then all these other teams are going to start inching their way closer. And the team, to me, that is the most intriguing, probably obviously, is Tennessee. Heupel is now in his second year. I just thought it was so funny that Milton, and I'm a Michigan fan, that he actually was starting there over Hendon Hooker. Because Milton is just one of those guys that he has this like 100 mile an hour, 100-yard arm, but that's all he does. He's a terrible quarterback. But Hooker was sensational. And I tell you what, I don't know what his Heisman odds are. I'd throw a few bucks on him because they can't be that low. So he's that good. They've got a dynamic running back and Small, a dynamic receiver in Tillman, Heupel's second-year offense. They're going to score a lot of points. So defensively, do they have what it takes? They do have some good players on defense as well, including Byron Young. And by the way, you're going to get confused all season long with Byron Young on Tennessee and Byron Young on Alabama.
Yes, you
That's
are.
another story. But yes, I think Tennessee is going to have a very good year this year.
They're going to have to pay attention to the defense here. They coughed up 33.6 points a game last football season here. That has got to be addressed. You cannot navigate the Southeast Conference with a mediocre defense, and that's not even a mediocre defense.
Sure.
That was a bad defense. So that's going to be priority number one for Tennessee this football season. But they're doing a great job recruiting here of late, which means their depth is beginning to multiply and add up for this football team. So many years in the past, at the beginning of a football season, Tennessee was always the team that everybody talked about to watch out for, and they never delivered the goods. So disappointing they've been in the past. They've got the makeup on this football team here to be a football team that can pull upsets and be a surprise type football team. You mentioned this division here. While the East has always been the least in the Southeast Conference, it's better than it's been in a long, long time this year. And Tennessee is indeed one of those contenders.
And then schedule-wise, they got to go back. They got to go to Pitt because Pitt came into Tennessee last year, but Pickett's no longer there. So I think Tennessee will get revenge, and they could open up. It's possible they could open up undefeated before they host Alabama, which would be awesome. They get Florida at home. LSU, we don't know what they got there yet on the road, but it is very possible that they're undefeated when they host Alabama, and what a sight that could be down in Knoxville if that is the case. And then the other big game, of course, is when they have to go to Georgia. So that, unfortunately, that's why it's going to be tough because they got to play Alabama, and even if they beat them at home, they most likely still have to beat Georgia in order to play in the SEC championship game. Because if Georgia and Tennessee both lose once and Georgia beats Tennessee, I just guess there's a head-to-head situation there in the SEC. It could be ranking, but Georgia would be ranked higher than Tennessee at the point. So yeah, it's going to be a big ask and probably too much to ask.
When you mentioned Tennessee, you mentioned Alabama. It brings a quick story to mind of mine. A friend of mine and I, we did a day-night doubleheader football Saturday. We went to Vanderbilt to watch Georgia play Vanderbilt in the day, at night, and we watched Vanderbilt play in the afternoon Alabama. And so we get to the game early. In the restroom before anything's even open. If the stadium's not even really officially open, I'm in the restroom and I get a tap on my shoulder. It's the Alabama State Patrol. And they tap on my shoulder and says, "Son, you've got to leave the room right now." Okay, I leave the room right now. And why did I have to leave the room right now? Because Gene Stallings needed to go to the bathroom. And as he walked in, he had an entourage of about 12 people and guards surrounding him.
That's
That's
crazy.
what I remember about Vanderbilt and Alabama.
Yeah, that is crazy. That's the SEC,
Yes,
though. It shows you how
yes, it is.
passionate they are about their football, and
Yes.
good for them. All right, the team that comes next in my mind, I think it'll be a tough one between Florida, Kentucky, and South Carolina. Um, I would think most people probably looking at Florida. Napier, we talked about it on yesterday's show. What a great hire! What a great opportunity! Not sure what happened to Dan Mullen. I just don't know what happened. I mean, things were going well the first few years, and then it just snapped like that. Uh, so it, but Napier's now taking over the program. He's got an exciting quarterback in Anthony Richardson. Is Richardson is does he need another year, or could this be the year that he can throw the football a little bit more consistently, so it's not just about him running around all over the place? We'll see, because that's going to be a big part, obviously, of their offense. Shorter is a really good wide receiver. Defensively, that is really where I think Florida has got to make hay if they're going to be competing with the big dogs in the SEC. They've got to play that kind of SEC dominating football, and they got to recruit. And can Napier recruit there? Can he turn things around there? I think he can. I don't know how fast he can do it, though.
Well, he's going to have to out-recruit Mario Cristobal in the state of Florida. That's a little bit of a tough ask to begin with. You're talking about Anthony Richardson, and can he be the guy there? I do know this, that in the hype of everything about Richardson and the buildup of him, you know what his nickname there was? AR-15. They had to tell him to ditch that nickname. AR-15 does not fit in today's
That's
society.
true. Yeah.
So, so we won't be reading about
No.
that. I still think, though, that Billy Napier will do a good job with the Florida Gators. I don't think they're going to be in contention to win this division, but I still think they'll be a good football team. They'll be a bowl team by season's
Yeah,
end.
and the guys to keep an eye on defense, you got Gervin Dexter, Brenton Cox, and Ventrell Miller. So they have some good players on defense, good players on offense. But really like a lot of teams in college football, especially in this division, they got to get good quarterback play. And who knows? Anything is possible. And if Anthony Richardson, if he's got it, then watch out. Florida could be a big surprise. Schedule-wise, tough. Their schedule opening up in September has got to be up there among the toughest in all of college football. They open with Utah and they end September at Tennessee.
Not a good schedule at all. In fact, Billy Napier probably realized what it was he was getting into when he opened up. The breather has to be South Florida.
And that's not going to be a total cupcake, but it will be a
No,
breather. And when you take a look at all those other teams, like Kentucky too.
they'll win the football game, but will they beat the number? That's going to be another
Yeah.
question, because you and I both think South Florida can be a bit of a point spread champion this year. But they do open up tough with Utah and Kentucky. We haven't talked about them yet, how good this football team is going to be this year. So if they don't get past Utah and Kentucky upends them, they could be 0-2 hosting South Florida with Tennessee on deck. Billy Napier could end up probably asking himself what he made that move for.
And speaking of Kentucky, Mark Stoops has just done an incredible job at Kentucky. Before he took it over, the program, I mean, they go to a bowl win every 4 or 5 years. That's about it. And now they're going to a bowl every year. So I think it's a remarkable job. He's done a great job recruiting. Most of it has been on defense. And once again, he's got a really good defense coming back. He does lose some key players, though, but he'll be okay. The big question is going to be Will Levis, the quarterback, the transfer from Penn State, and whether or not he's the real deal. Because there's a lot of draft nicks out there, first round. He could be the first. He could actually be the first quarterback taken. He's that talented. There's a lot of talent there, but there's also a lot of inconsistency there. So I'm not willing to say that he's a lock first round draft pick yet, but if he lives up to the hype and he could be that good and he puts it all together, Kentucky could be awfully dangerous again.
Well, the problem with him this particular year is their offensive coordinator bolted, and he's now with the LA Rams, Liam Cohen. So that's a big, big loss for Kentucky, more so than any player to have to plug a new offensive coordinator into a team that was really on the come offensively. They're going to also be tested this year. 10 of their 12 opponents were in bowl games last year. That makes for a very, very difficult schedule here. But I'm a big Mark Stoops fan, and he did something really, really unusual last year. If you consider the fact that they were minus 11 in net overall turnovers last year, yet they still won 10 games. That's almost
That
incredible.
should bode well
To be
for
at
them
that
this year.
right. To be, because you figure the minus 11 is going to
Yep.
improve. If it gets back to zero, it's a big
Yep.
improvement. Okay. So, that edge will be working in his favor here as well. So I really like this Kentucky football team because I like this coach.
Yeah. You have players like Jaquez Jones, Keydron Smith on defense, J.J. Weaver. Let's not forget Christopher Rodriguez, the running back. So they got the quarterback, they got the running back. They've got a good defense schedule, like you said, at Florida week 2. And they also got to go to Mississippi, Tennessee. And then at home, you got Georgia. And that's going to be late in the year. And even the games, even the non-conference games are not gimmies. At least they're at home against Northern Illinois and Miami of Ohio. So that's the one saving grace there. And most of their games this year are at home. So that's a good thing there. Even though it's a tough schedule, there won't be a cakewalk all year, with the exception of Vanderbilt and Youngstown State. They do have a majority of their games at home.
And Vanderbilt's going to be up a little bit this year here too. They're the dregs of the conference and have been for the longest time. We'll talk about them in a bit, but that could come at a bad spot because they've got Georgia on deck the game after that, so there could be a little bit of a flat scheduling spot for Kentucky.
South Carolina and Shane Beamer. This is the beginning of a nice turnaround. I don't think this is just a fluke. I think they're headed in the right direction with Beamer. Beamer can recruit. He could also convince players to come in and transfer on the portal. Who would have expected Spencer Rattler to choose South Carolina? That shows you how good Beamer is at recruiting. And Rattler was just so disappointing last year. See, I said it last year. I was never really bought into Rattler as this. He's going to be the first pick in the draft guy. I saw some talent there. I understood what they were saying. It's Oklahoma. It's Riley. He's talented. And I get the whole thing. But I didn't expect him to be that bad. And there was something wrong. I don't know what it was. I'm assuming it was psychological. But something was off with Rattler. So now at South Carolina, this should probably be a great situation for him. There's no pressure at South Carolina compared to Oklahoma. Zero. I know that they love their football at South Carolina, but Oklahoma is like an NFL kind of deal. So as far as the fan base and the media and expectations, that's not going to be the case at South Carolina. So if Spencer Rattler has a nice season, they got a lot of interesting, talented, skill position players for Rattler to play around with. The question is, which means I think they're going to do a really good job offensively. So the question is will that defense be able to hold up?
Well, the defense was okay last year. 354 yards a game, 24 points a game. That's okay. There's nothing bad about that. Spencer Rattler succumbed to the pressure at Oklahoma last year with Caleb Williams, an outstanding talent, lurking in the background, and he just caved. Is basically what happened to him. So many people saw him, like you were saying, and thought he had the look and the feel of Patrick Mahomes. Running, being able to throw on the run, escaping pass rushes, and so forth and whatnot. And he was the leading candidate for the Heisman Trophy at the beginning of the football season. It didn't pan out. Bottom line here is South Carolina benefits because it didn't pan out. Shane Beamer picks that up, and he also brings in an outstanding recruit from James Madison. His name is Antoine Wells, one of the best wide receivers in the FCS. He'll pair real well with Spencer Rattler here. So I think this offense is going to get a big, big boost, if you will. Only 338 yards per game last football season. If they can kick that up around 400 yards, they could be a team that no one will want to play this year.
And they got besides Georgia, they have one of the next best tight end tandems going in college football. Bell and then Stogner, the transfer from Oklahoma. They got two legitimate tight ends. You mentioned Wells. They have Josh Vann. Beal Smith comes over from Wake Forest in the backfield. it's a big significant loss to not have Kevin Harris there, but they're going to be okay with Beal Smith and the rest of those receivers. So the defense, like you said, they were okay. The problem is they lost some key players from that defensive side of the ball. So whether or not is it too early in Beamer's transition here with South Carolina for them to expect much on defense? Because when you got to play some of the teams you're going to have to play in the SEC, you got to play some defense because those other teams are going to play defense, and those other teams are also going to have offenses,
especially in that conference. No
Yeah.
question. You got a little bit of pressure here on Beamer as well. Simply, if for no other reason, it's spelled Spencer Rattler.
Yeah,
He's supposed to
that's true.
succeed. Exactly.
And the offensive coordinator, because that's important, is going to be who's it going to be? That he was an assistant. This kid, this coach Satterfield, I believe, he was an assistant with the Carolina Panthers.
Is he related to the Satterfield, the head coach, Appalachian State? I'm wondering.
I don't know. Interesting.
You know,
I'm not so sure about that, but we'll see, because that's also where some of the pressure might come from. Because Beamer's probably like, hey man, I do all the recruiting. It's your job to get the quarterback to play well. Schedule, top 3 tough. Georgia State, we talked about. They're no pushover in the Sun Belt. They almost beat Auburn last year early in the season in that spot. At Arkansas, and then hosting Georgia. So how about those first 3 games? And their last 3 games are at Florida, hosting Tennessee, and at Clemson.
Salty, to say the least. The good news for this football team is they've dominated non-conference teams. They've gone 33-6 the last 39 games. Clemson would be one of those guys.
Yeah,
Georgia State in the opener would be one of those guys. Charlotte comes in, a non-conference, doesn't figure to give them much of a tussle. South Carolina State's a gimme. So if they can take advantage of those non-conference games, maybe lose only to Clemson per se, they could be in a nice position.
All right, now it's off to Missouri, and this is, I think, going to be a real key year for Drinkwitz. I like Drinkwitz. I think he's a good coach. He's a kind of entertaining coach to listen to. He's got balls. He says what he says. I like that, especially when you're coaching Missouri. And nobody really pays attention to Missouri in the SEC. He's done an okay job. It's pretty much a 500 type of team every year. He's only been there a couple of years, but it's sooner or later he's got to get this team to the point that, hey, can we compete with the rest of these other teams that are right behind Georgia? Can we compete for that second spot behind Georgia in the next couple of years? And the big deal is going to have to be offensively this year, because who knows what's going on at quarterback. They lose Beatty, who was such a big-time running back for them. So there's a lot of questions offensively. Most of the guys returning, the quality players are better on the defensive side of the ball. But I don't know whether or not they have enough on offense to compete in the SEC this year.
Well, give Drinkwitz his credit. He went out and really overhauled the roster in the offseason here, both in the transfer portal and in the recruiting. Outstanding job he did in the recruiting wars. 15th in the country. That's amazing. We're talking Missouri, 15th best recruiting class in the country. He landed a couple of 5-stars. He's very excited about what's going on with this program, and he's selling it, which is the main thing. If the players buy into this, like you say, he's a kind of a football coach that I think can get the best out of these players. You look up and down his schedule this year, I think it's formidable. I mean, you're going to go to Kansas State. He could win that football game. Going to go to Auburn. Who knows what happens with Auburn this football season here? The South Carolina's going to be a big road test, as will Tennessee. He's got to take care of business at home is what he's got to do. I think every home game is winnable, perhaps arguably other than Georgia. So if he does business at home like he's supposed to, he'll end up with a winning record this football season.
It's still going to be asking a lot. So even if they win those first 2 home games, at Kansas State, at Auburn, at Florida, with Georgia at home, those are your first 6 games of the season. That's gonna be tough. He's going to have to knock off. He might, I don't know. He's going to probably have to win 2 of those 3 road games, because they're not beating Georgia.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Kansas State and Auburn could be winnable football games.
They
for
are.
this team,
now, whether they do it or not, it's another question. Yeah.
Exactly. If they do, they're on the path. If they don't, they could be struggling uphill.
And just like a few of these other teams, like we talked about, it's up to quarterback because there's talent in the quarterback room, but we have no idea who's starting on opening day. I think it's best that they start Cook. I think that's what they want because he's the younger quarterback. But if he's not ready, I think that's a bad sign. Okay, and then Vanderbilt, like you mentioned, they have their head coach year two after another bad year at Vanderbilt, only 2 wins. So, what do you think about uh, Vanderbilt and whether or not you think they have the right head coach?
Well, whoever is the head coach really is up against it each and every year because they're always dead last in recruiting in that conference for a couple of reasons. Number one, they're going up against the big boys. Number two, their academic standard is so high that he cannot bring the type of football players in that play football and win games. So that puts him in a hole right to begin with. So very, very difficult for this football team. But I'm not going to give up on the team here. It's, I liked them before in the past. They never really delivered the goods and probably will be a last place team this year. Yes, but I think they've also got the makings to be formidable or to be a type of a team that could pull an upset or two here along the way. Uh, Last place, it's hard to make a case for a team that improves as much as Vanderbilt can, but don't dismiss them. I don't think they're going to be the Vanderbilt of old.
Yeah, there's some good players on defense, but like always at Vanderbilt, do they have enough offense? And usually they can, they have like a running back that excites you, and okay, maybe they could pound off a few wins here and there. But I don't know. I don't know about them this year on offense. We'll see. But I do think they have a defensive coach. They got some talent on defense. Maybe the defense can keep them some games this year.
Well, they're going to have to they're going to win games the old-fashioned way. They're going to have to outstat opponents. The only opponent they outyarded last year was East Tennessee State in their season opener. They went winless from that point thereafter here, so they're going to have to execute a lot better on the playing field.
All right, now let's talk about the West and Alabama. So Alabama, Nick Saban again. They're going to be ultra dangerous with Bryce Young at quarterback. He's only a sophomore, so it's lucky that he's a redshirt sophomore because chances are he'll be gone at the end of this year and off to the NFL. But the rest of the offense, you're talking about having to replace Jameis Williams. That is going to be very, very hard. They also have to replace Mechie, even though he was hurt. But those are two big explosive players that they have to replace. Burton, they get him from Georgia, so that'll help a little bit. They get Gibbs from Georgia Tech at running back. That'll help a little bit. But I can't see them being as explosive as last year. They're going to be dangerous as always, but I just can't expect them to be that dangerous. The question is, at some point, I think, in order now for Alabama to win national championships in the next year or two, I think they have to be a little bit better on defense. And I think they were okay and better, and they had the talent on defense, but the secondary wasn't really that dominant, like the typical Alabama Nick Saban dominant secondary. Will Anderson could very well be the top pick in the NFL draft next April. There's a lot of other talent on defense. This is the makings of maybe one of his best defenses in some years. I think if this defense can do that for Saban, be the best defense we've seen since the early championship days when his defenses really carried them into the championship, then I think they have a legitimate chance to do it. They still are going to be there. They're probably going to be smoking, a playoff berth. But I don't know. Offensively, like I said, I think it's going to be tough when your Heisman quarterback comes back, which is very rare, whether or not he can kind of duplicate that when the talent is not as good as it was the previous year.
Well, the defense stepped up last year, finally, for the program here. They improved 49 yards a game, only a 303-yard defense, and that's where they're going to have to continue their improvement. Nick Saban hung his hat on his defenses in the past when he won those national championships. He knows he's got to improve that way this particular football season. The thing also that works for Nick Saban is the fact of how he bowed out last year. If you take a look at whenever he's been with Alabama and they've had a 2-loss season, his teams have gone 77-6 combined the follow-up years. That's pretty strong. And whenever his team loses a bowl game to end the season, they're 64-6. 4 times winning national championships, doing just that. That's the roles that he's in here this particular year. So he'll be playing with a lot of fire and a lot of revenge in his eyes this particular season. They're going to be double-digit favorites in every game they play this year. It's kind of hard to step in front of a team like that and say they're not going to be in the college football playoff.
Here's the thing, and this is why I wonder, and I like what you're saying, because that rebound from not winning a national championship, that kind of deal, after being the champions, I can see that as a reason to be optimistic for Alabama to come back and win another championship. But let's keep in mind that they were very fortunate to make the playoffs last year. If Auburn does what Auburn should have done, Alabama loses, they don't even get to the playoffs. Let's throw in the fact that they didn't win, and again, I think injuries had a lot to do with that. But also, this year, defensively, on the road, they got to go to Texas, they got to go to Arkansas, they got to go to Tennessee, they got to go to LSU, they got to go to Ole Miss. They would have to play and win in the SEC championship game. All of their tough games, only one tough game is at home, and that's the revenge game against Texas A&M. All of their other toughest games are on the road. That's going to be a big ask.
It is a big ask for a football team, for any team, even Alabama. But again, I'm going to allude to the fact that they will be double-digit favorites in every one of those road games. So if they don't play well, it means they obviously tanked in a football game like that. The other teams are all capable of getting up for and pulling a rug out of Alabama, especially on their home field with a frenzied home crowd behind them doing just that. But and I hate backing favorites, and I hate backing teams that are supposed to win championships because they're targeted. And Alabama will be targeted, but I think there's a little bit of a different Alabama we're going to see this year, and that's going to be that Alabama football team that is coming out with fire in their eyes because of what happened last year.
It's always better to side with Alabama the year after they don't win a national championship.
There's no question about that.
Texas A&M, Jimbo Fisher. Boy, you just I guess Texas A&M fans got to love this NIL deal stuff, because they're bringing in a lot of guys in recruiting over the last few years, and the NIL deal thing, and writing up checks, and players are coming in there and earning some nice money playing for the Aggies. Kenny put it together. We know he's won a national championship before, Jimbo Fisher. He beats Alabama last year, which was a huge win for the program. So now there's so much expectations. This is supposed to be our chance now to win the division, play in the SEC championship game, take over, sort of like Georgia, take over. I really like the quarterback move for Max Johnson. That is a
LSU,
nice upgrade. Yeah, that's a nice upgrade. Even though they got an exciting young quarterback in King, let him sit the bench for another year. Max Johnson, I think he's the perfect type of quarterback. They've got an explosive running back. They got an explosive wide receiver. I'm a little bit worried about the defense. They lost some key guys on defense, several key players. But again, he's recruited really well. So let's see some of these young players he's recruited, sort of like no names until this year types. Let's see that next wave of players make him look good on the recruiting trail and actually do it on the football field, because we know they're very talented.
They are a very talented team. They had their best recruiting class ever in school history last year, number 1 overall in the country. So he's got a lot of great players here to talk about, to be able to fill some missing holes, because they were going to be a little bit late as far as returning starters go, but that's by the wayside right now. My biggest concern for them is the middle of their schedule. If you take a look here, they've got 4 games in a row away from home at the end of September through almost the end of October. Arkansas, Mississippi State, Alabama, and South Carolina. They are not going to make a successful 4-0 road trek against those 4 teams. I'll tell you that right now. It's just too difficult to have to ask teams in the Southeast Conference to do just that week after week after week. They'll get tripped up somewhere along the way, which means if they do get tripped up along the way, they had better hope it's
It's not
Alabama.
Alabama.
It's not Alabama. Exactly right.
Yeah.
If it's not Alabama, if they can beat Alabama, they'll be in contention for the talk. But if it is Alabama and that's their loss, then they might not have any bullets or anything left to say about getting to the playoffs.
They have to play Appalachian State, maybe the best team in the Sun Belt. They back to back with Miami, who's
Yep.
going to be much improved. So those are the two games that they play before they got to go on that road trip. And at the end of the season, they host Florida and at Auburn. Yeah, it's. I think the schedules just might be. Maybe it's a year too early. Maybe Young has another strong year, and he heads off to the NFL next year at Alabama, and then next year is Texas A&M's year. So that's kind of the way I'd be thinking about it. I just don't know if that schedule is just really.
It's really, really tough. And again, a lot of pressure on him because of having this number one recruiting class in the country here. Jimbo Fisher wins football games, but he also loses games every year he's supposed to win.
That's true too.
There's a
Yeah.
puzzling, 20-point favorite, lose the game, what happened type of
Yep.
a situation. And we'll probably likely see that again this year.
Well, last year has the big win over Alabama. Everything's looking good, and then out of nowhere, they lose two out of the last three against teams they shouldn't be losing to, even though they were road games. And that's what you can't do. You
No,
can't lose those games like that.
no.
So, all right, let's now talk about the up and coming Arkansas Razorbacks, and how can you not be uh, kind of happy in what's going on at Arkansas? What was it? Just a few years ago, they had back-to-back two-win seasons. So Sam Pittman, Sam Pittman takes over? What kind of hire is this? And then Sam Pittman just does a really good job. He's one of the most, so far since he's been a head coach, he's been one of the most underrated head coaches in college football. It's only been a couple of years, but he has done a tremendous job with this program. He loses his all world wide receiver Burks, but he's got his quarterback back, KJ Jefferson, and he came on last year, came from nowhere, had a tremendous first season, banged up a little bit, and that's because he's a big guy. He's gonna run around a little bit. He's gonna get hurt sometimes if he keeps that up, but hopefully he can stay healthy. They've got an exciting running back room. That's going to help out. So I think they're going to be really, even though they lose Burks, they should be okay on offense with the quarterback returning. So it's going to be up to that defense. There's some quality players on defense, but they've also lost a lot of really good players on the defensive side of the ball. That's where I think I'd be a little bit more concerned. But still, Arkansas is going to have another nice year, and they're probably also going to pull off at least one really good upset.
Will they win 9 games this year like they did last year? I don't think so. Only because it was a tall, tall mountain that they climbed last football season. And a lot of those teams they beat, they're going to be going into revenge this year. So the other football teams will be a little bit more focused. It wasn't an Arkansas football team that came in and had just won 7 games the previous 3 years. Now it's an Arkansas team that won 9 games last year and is a player inside the Southeast Conference. So he's going to have to overcome that. We're going to find out how good of a coach he is. He's done a great job recruiting, but we're going to see how good of a coach he is this football season here. But all in all, as much as I like Sam Pittman, I think this team goes backwards this year.
Oh, okay. I think they could pull off 9 wins again, including the bowl, of course. That first game, Cincinnati. We talked about it on yesterday's show.
Yes.
That's a big one because we don't know what's going to go on with Cincinnati. They lost some major players, but that's a game you have to win. And then SEC right away, right after that at home. I think they could be 3-0. I think they need to be 3-0 if they're going to have a quality season when they have that yearly matchup with Texas A&M at Arlington. And let's remember, they had that nice win over Texas A&M last year. That was an impressive win, and I'm sure Texas A&M wants revenge. So, and then right after that, they got to play Alabama. That's a tough schedule. Okay, Mississippi's next. Lane Kiffin. Looks like Lane Kiffin is the right fit at Mississippi. You just have no idea how long Lane Kiffin is going to be around. It's the SEC, so I can't imagine, but you never know where Lane Kiffin would go from here. He's probably not going to be Mississippi's coach for the next 20 years. He's just not that type of guy. But
No.
I think that there's more success on the table. Yes, he loses his quarterback, Corral, but he makes a nice move to get Jackson Dart from USC. So he's got a lot of talent. He also did a nice job transferring in Zachary Evans, the running back. So he made some really shrewd transfer pickups, which is going to help out, including at linebacker with Troy Brown. Uh, I think they're going to be competitive. You know, they're going to be an exciting team to watch. Um, and I think their schedule, we just talked about two teams that had some murderous schedules. Mississippi schedule's a little bit better. I think they have a chance to kind of get some steam early on in the season where if things go really well for them and Dart is a good quarterback, it's possible they could be undefeated when they take on Texas A&M on October 29th.
It is. He's done a great job, especially in the transfer portal, where he is, as we talked about yesterday, the king of all coaches in college football transfer portals. And he did a great job bringing those players in. You mentioned Jackson Dart, Zach Evans. He brings in Ulysses Bentley, a running back from SMU who is rushed for over 1,500 yards. So what he does, for people who didn't see the show yesterday, the reason he's the king is because the players that he brings in from the transfer portal weren't only 4 and 5 star recruits. They were players that started at the school that he's bringing them in from. So he plugs them right in, and they're counted as starters here for his football team. So he knows what he's doing. He's got his own game plan, and it's working real well for him. My concern is a couple of trap spots in his schedule here this year. You look at how he should open up well. Yes, I'll agree, but I'm going to be a little bit concerned about that Kentucky game on October 1st.
Sure.
That's we talked about Kentucky earlier on in the show.
Homecoming.
Homecoming, there you go. That's exactly right. Homecoming, and he's got nothing before, nothing afterwards. So it looks like this could be a easy spot for them. But whenever it's too obvious, it isn't. He's got to go to LSU and A&M back-to-back weeks, followed up with Alabama.
Oh, the schedule gets a lot tougher starting in that Texas A&M game.
Exactly right. So he's going to have to make the best of it in the beginning of the football season. He's got 3 losing teams to open up the season. And in fact, if you look, you go even further than that. He's got Tulsa and Kentucky, 2 bowl teams after that, but he's got, then again, 3 more losing teams after that. So the schedule is, it really is workable for him this football season here. And he can make some noise. There's no question about that.
Mississippi State will stay in state, and Mike Leach, everybody was caught off guard that Mike Leach became the head coach at Mississippi State a couple of years ago. And things did not go well in year 1. But last year, things turned around a little bit. And that has to do with Will Rogers, a quarterback. So he's got himself a very nice quarterback who's going to be there probably for another couple of years. He's not one of these rocket arm kind of guys that is going to be a first-round pick at this point. Got a long way to go before he might turn into one of those players, but there's a lot to like. He's a very accurate quarterback. There's some nice weapons, skill position players. So offensively, Mike Leach, they're going to score some points. I think they're going to be fine. It's always going to take a little time to learn Mike Leach's system. Now it's been a couple of years, so I think offensively they should be fine. The question is, do they have enough players on defense? The good news is they have a lot of players back on defense. So I don't know. I mean, Mississippi State, good quarterback, good talent coming back. Maybe they're an interesting sleeper in this division.
I think they can be. I think number one, the schedule works out well for him, and number two, if you take a look at Mississippi State last year, they improved really well on both sides of the football. Almost 100 yards on offense and 45 yards on defense. That sort of went unnoticed in a 7-win season for this football team. If they can improve any at all on that, they're going to be a real tough team. And again, I keep using this phrase, but the type of a team inside this conference that the opponents will not want to have to play. Their toughest games, I know they go to Alabama and they go to LSU, but their home schedule, they can really work through their home schedule. They should beat Memphis. They should beat Bowling Green. Who knows what happens in the A&M game? I think they can take Arkansas down. So he's got the makings here to improve on that 7-win season he had last year.
And the other 2 teams to round out the division, Auburn, Brian Harsin. Wow. Another situation that kind of caught everybody off guard, going from Boise, West Coast to the SEC is dangerous. And it sure looked like it backfired a little bit last year. But they were this close from, if you beat Alabama, everything's okay. Everything's all right. We're right behind you. We've got a whole off season to look forward to next year, and let's go. And they couldn't finish the job they should have, and because of that, it was a very painful off season for Brian Harsin. And I don't know. I mean, the quarterback situation is kind of iffy. They've got a great running back in Bigsby, really nice 2-punch actually at running back. They've got some talented players up front in the front seven on defense, so I think they're going to be fine there. But because they have such a big question mark at quarterback, if they get off to a slow start, Brian Harsin could be in trouble.
which they won't. They open up the season with 5 consecutive home games in a row. If that's a slow start within those first 5 games, he's in deep trouble, okay, with a 5 game homestand to open the season. The thing people are overlooking here, and I was not a big Brian Harsin fan on the hire because when he took over at Boise State, he didn't really improve that football program. He kept them sustainable, but he was hired nonetheless at Auburn when they needed to hire a head coach. But look at last year, look deeper and deeper inside those numbers. They improved offensively and defensively on both sides of the football. They improved on points scoring and points allowed both ways. The Auburn football team did. And if, like you say, if they take Alabama out, we're not talking about the fans being down on Brian Harsin. They're talking about giving him an extension.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what it means to win one key or win or lose one key football game. So, and I know he's also taking a lot of flack in the off season here. He's sick and tired of hearing it. So we'll see whether or not if Brian Harsin's got any coaching ability at all, it will come out this football season. But I think all the arrows that were shot at him were shot for the wrong reasons last year.
I just, you know what? I think in order for them to turn it around, I think one of the young quarterbacks needs to step up because I don't believe in this Finley guy. He's just way too big and he's just too inaccurate. And then the Calzada kid has got a lot of experience, and Texas A&M. Let's recall Calzada started when they upset Alabama last year, but Calzada is just a quarterback. He's just a guy. He's not special. So now maybe that's what they need because they have a really good defense and a really good running game. And maybe that's why he'll probably win the starting job. But if they want to be special, I think they got to hope that they've got a young quarterback on that, one of those young quarterbacks on the roster that can be that guy. But I expect, especially interviewing Brian Matthews, who covers Auburn Tigers football, I expect from what he said, Calzada to probably win the starting job.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. When he was at A&M, he's probably the reason that A&M didn't improve like they were supposed to because he was a mediocre quarterback at best there. But he can fill the shoes here. And you mentioned Finley. My goodness, how could you trust a quarterback who signs a big multi-mega NIL deal with Amazon and then goes out and gets arrested the next day for driving recklessly and speeding 126 miles an hour? I don't think you're going to find Finley playing too many games or starting too many games for Auburn this year, and that's why I think Calzada will be the guy, as you mentioned.
All right, and then finally, LSU. Can you believe we've talked about every team in the SEC so far, and the last team we're going to talk about is LSU. And that's usually not a good thing. But Brian Kelly is now the new man in town. And this is, look, you can say what you want about Orgeron being like a genius recruiter, which is exactly what he was, genius recruiter. But this is a major upgrade as far as a head coach at LSU. But the big question is Brian Kelly is coming to the Southeast. I mean, what does he know about Southeastern football? That's going to be the big question. But if he can figure that out and that doesn't become an issue, and he's got the right recruiting base set up, he's got the pipeline and all that set up, yeah, I give him a couple of years, and I think they're going to be at the top again because he's just too good of a head coach. He's a winner. He's going to turn this thing around, I'm pretty sure. I don't think it's going to be one of those, yeah, he should never have gone to the SEC. It didn't work. I just think Brian Kelly, and the proof is what we've seen from his resume. Wherever he goes, he wins, and I think he's going to win here.
I think he's going to win here too. 10+ wins 7 times in his career. 2 college football playoffs. He made a trip to the ACC championship game. The guy is a winner. What I'm going to enjoy the most about him being there is being able to understand the post-game interviews with the LSU head coach. Because Ed Ogeron, it was ridiculous listening to him talk after the football games. Brian Kelly, what he's got here, I think, is maybe a little bit of a two-headed quarterback problem that could be developing here because he's got two real good quarterbacks. Jaden Daniels comes in from Arizona State. He's really, really a terrific athlete, and he's got Miles Brennan, a fifth-year senior here as well. So they're not going to be hurting at the quarterback
No.
position here. No, the only problem with this football team is expectations because it's Brian Kelly, because it's LSU. But I still think he was a good hire. A lot of people scratch their head and wonder, my goodness, what's Kelly leaving Notre Dame for and going down south to LSU? Well, number one, we know it was about the money. But he can also help revive this football program because this football program has been 2 years in a row without a winning season here. That'll end this year with Kelly.
Yeah, but speaking of expectations, this could be a team to get behind because in year one, I think the expectations are going to be a little bit, okay, we improve from last year. We'll get to a better bowl. There'll be brighter horizons, and yeah, but we're not going to compete for a championship. Not this year. It just can't happen this year in year one. But I think there are going to be some of those games when they're a dog that you're going to be tempted to be like, you know what, Brian Kelly, you never know. Maybe it's a year early. So, like you said, he's going to have good quarterback play. He's going to have good running back play with Emery. He's got Butte at wide receiver, who's probably the best wide receiver in all college football. And they got good players on defense. So they got Florida State to open up with, which they'll be favored. So you can't lose that game. And then they've got three other games there that they shouldn't lose, and they're at Auburn, which they can win. So if things go really well for them, they could start 5-0 when they host Tennessee on October 8th. But I'm gonna think that maybe this is a team that could be a sleeper for bigger and better things. Because I think the expectations year one are not that high
You
across the
want to make
country.
you want to make money with LSU this football season, Greg? Do one thing: back them when they're a dog against an opponent that's less than 875 win percentage. Brian Kelly in his career is 28-10 against the spread as a dog in that role. It's because he outcoaches the other teams,
That
and
could
they'll
be
be
at Auburn on October 1st.
exactly right. And wherever he dogs up, he could dog up at Florida, possibly. Who
Yep.
knows? You don't know. He could dog up at Arkansas.
Yep.
Maybe it depends on what
Texas
Arkansas is
A&M.
doing. He'll dog up against Alabama for sure, but Alabama's win percentage will probably be over that parameter. So keep an eye on that. There could be two or three nice tickets to cash with LSU this year with Brian Kelly in that role.
And look, I haven't seen the national championship odds yet. We're going to have our predictions on divisions and playoffs and national championships, and we're going to go over the futures. We'll give our sleepers and all that. That's going to be on our show in 2 weeks on the 24th. But I'm interested to see what they're. What do you know what it is? Because I'm going to guess. I haven't seen any futures at all. I'm going to guess it's probably somewhere around. Maybe because of name recognition, it's 40 or 50 to 1.
You're talking about LSU to win a national
Yeah.
championship?
What do
Uh,
you think it probably is?
I'd say you're in the right range. Yes, I'd say you're in the right range. Number one, they're a quality team out of the SEC, but they have to come out of other better teams in the SEC, so that
Sure.
makes the price probably in that range. Yes.
Okay. All right. So now let's get out of the SEC and talk Big Ten football. So the Big Ten. We start in the East with the big dogs, the Ohio State Buckeyes and Ryan Day. Ryan Day is not happy because Ryan Day lost to Michigan. And so the first thing Ryan Day did was hire the best defensive coordinator in college football from Oklahoma State, Jim Knowles, and said, enough of this. I can't lose to Michigan once. So that they're going to be looking for revenge there. They have their quarterback, C.J. Stroud, who will most likely be the first quarterback in the draft. It's going to be between Stroud and, of course, Alabama and Young. Most likely those two guys battling it out for the first quarterback. Travion Henderson, maybe the best running back in all of college football. The receiver, what a performance in the Rose Bowl. They lose two superstar receiver first-round draft picks, and then this guy goes out and has that monster Rose Bowl. So offensively, they're going to be a juggernaut again. The big issue is really on defense for Ohio State. Michigan just pounded the hell out of him in that game. Their linebacker play was underwhelming. And really, the pass rush hasn't been all that great in the last couple of years. And that I still think might be an issue. I love their secondary, and they usually have a top notch secondary. Had a little issues even last year, but I think their secondary is going to be one of the best again in college football. But it's that front seven on defense I'm still not sure about.
You mentioned how upset Ryan Day was. He'll come into the season much like Nick Saban in Alabama because the first time ever he did not make his way to the Big Ten championship with Ohio State last year. You mentioned he made the move he needed to make. He hired Jim Knowles, the Oklahoma State defensive coordinator, and I'll tell you how good this guy is. He improved the Oklahoma State defense significantly all 3 years. They started out as a 452-yard defense. They were 294 yards defense when they hired him away from there last year. This guy knows how to coach up a defense. Shockingly, and this is probably one of the most alarming stats that I came across in the offseason here, Ohio State finished ninth in the Big Ten Conference each of the past 2 seasons in total defense.
There you go.
There you go. That's the reason you're going to see Jim Knowles on the sidelines at Ohio State this year. Ryan Day realizes that, knows that, and if he's the real deal, if he's the guy, the Buckeyes will be back to where they were in the past.
Schedule-wise, look, it's not going to be easy. We talked about Notre Dame. They host Notre Dame, and that's not an easy opener by any stretch. They also host Wisconsin later in the month. But, Wisconsin is not usually a team at Ohio State unless they have one of their best teams. I don't think that's the case. So Ohio State's schedule, they got to go to Michigan State. They got to go to Penn State. But they get Michigan at home. I probably would look at the Penn State game, the road game on the 29th. How good is Penn State by then? If Penn State's having one of their really good years, that could end up being the most dangerous game on their schedule. But I think the schedule works out for them pretty well.
I think it's a total coaching mismatch, the Ohio State-Penn State game. I'm not a James Franklin fan at all, and Ryan Day's going to have this juggernaut here this football season here. I know, it'll be a purported another whiteout for Penn State, and everybody's going to read about that and do all those things. But Ohio State, you're going to find them as a cheap wholesale price on the road. I'd rather lay the Buckeyes minus the points at Penn State in a coaching mismatch than I would have them come into the horseshoe and have to lay double the amount of points. They open up the season with 5 home games in a row, do the Buckeyes here. 2 of them against very formidable opponents, Wisconsin and Notre Dame. They open up 5-0 against those football teams. They'll be on their way.
Okay, then we move on to Michigan, the champs of the Big Ten last year, as a Michigan fan. By the way, Kevin Noon, who covers the Ohio State Buckeyes, is going to be on this channel. I think it's going to be Monday. I think I record that interview with Kevin Noon. Done a great job covering the Buckeyes for many years. And I'm also finally going to set up an interview with a Michigan analyst and writer, something I have not been able to find in the last couple of years, somebody good. And I'm going to be setting that interview up as well. But Michigan finally gets the job done. And last year we talked about it. And, we were going through how things worked out for Jim Harbaugh and all of his past losses and how Michigan, this spot, Jim Harbaugh and Michigan, they just don't get the job done. But I just kept saying last year, as a fan of the team, that there was something different about this team. That I said it all along. The major difference with last year's team was the philosophy. They went back to the basics. They went back to what makes Jim Harbaugh teams effective. They played power, smash mouth football, and they had his best offensive line he's had there. That used to be that got him success, especially at Stanford, and what's going to keep success rolling at Michigan. The big question with Michigan is going to be the quarterback position. McNamara was a nice find. He's a very Brian Greasy type of quarterback. But J.J. McCarthy, that's the difference maker. That's the kid that has more talent than McNamara. I think McNamara starts the season. I don't know how long he'll stay quarterback. It probably until they lose a game. Maybe they're not supposed to. And as long as McCarthy's healthy, I think they're going to give McCarthy a chance to start if that happens. And if he does, he may not lose the job again. I just think McCarthy may not be this year. Maybe next year is the year for McCarthy. But I think Michigan has a much better chance to compete for a national championship if J. McCarthy is their quarterback.
I make Michigan like Georgia in the Southeast Conference, Greg, this football season, in the fact that They were devastated with losses on the defense in the National Football League draft. 7 starters were drafted by the National Football League in the offseason here. That's really, really difficult to have to replace in
including
one,
Hutchinson.
led by Hutchinson, exactly, who might be the rookie of the year. He may not be the best player in the draft when it's all said and done. But now you've suddenly got 7 starters that are gone from that defense that improved mightily last year, over 100 yards a game
And the
last year.
coordinator.
And the coordinator on top of it. 100 yards a game, 18 points a game. It was all about the defense for Michigan. The old theory, pound the ball on the ground and stop the run. They did just that. 5.2 yards a carry last year was that football team. Like you said, the old style smash mouth football. But they're going to have to play the defense this football season if they want to succeed.
Yeah, I totally agree. Offensively, I think they're going to have the opportunity to be even more explosive this year, especially if McCarthy gets in the action, because Blake Corum is not only going to be taking over more of a full-time role, but I am a big fan of Donovan Edwards. Keep that name in their head. Donovan Edwards is going to be a star at running back. He's a great receiver out of the backfield, a tremendous athlete. Corum's really good too. So I think Edwards and Corum, that's going to be dynamic. They get Ronnie Bell back. He was lost with the ACL first game of the season. He was their
Yes.
most explosive wide receiver last year, and unfortunately didn't even play the rest of the season. So offensively, they're going to be even better in my mind, and they're going to need to be, like you said, because the defense lost so much.
Well, Jim Harbaugh was quoted in spring camp, coming out of spring camp, and said that this football team is scary good. So, he's as confident about this football team now than he was, maybe even more than last year. So we'll see whether or not they've got the moxie to do just that. But they're going to catch a very, very angry Ohio State
Oh,
team
yeah.
at the Horseshoe this year.
Yeah. Michigan State will stay in the state, and Mel Tucker has done a nice job there. He's done some wonders through transfers and recruiting, but especially transfers. So he's done a really nice job changing the culture there immediately. D'Antonio was a nice coach, more of a defensive coach, and they won games. But Tucker, I mean, they've kind of really gone. I mean, last year was such a huge turnaround, winning 11 games, and it was a Kenneth Walker. It was kind of a different feel, and they had an exciting young quarterback and Peyton Thorne. So Walker's gone, but I think the running back situation should still be solid. They bring in some more transfers, but Peyton Thorne is just another year advanced, so I think that's going to be a big deal. Jaden Reed's back at receiver. They've got a lot of good players coming back on defense as well. The defense actually might be better than they were last year. I just don't know whether or not I'm going to be intrigued, because you lose that explosiveness of Kenneth Walker. He was so good that I just don't know whether or not that's going to hurt them so much that when they take on the big teams, they're just not going to have enough, because they got to go to Michigan, they got to go to Penn State, they got to go to Washington earlier in the year, and they also have to host Ohio State and Wisconsin. So they got a tough schedule.
The defense had better be better than they were last year, because they weren't very good last year. In fact, this is the football team that I think drops and plummets the most this
Really?
year in the Big Ten. Yes, I do. And, I can make a simple case and just put tape over the name of Michigan State. What helped them most last year was having Kenneth Walker in that backfield. He kept the defenses honest. He's not there. But what happened mostly to this football team last year is they go from 2 wins to 11 wins, despite the fact that they allowed more yards than they gained on the season. You can't do that. You can't be an 11-win football team and allow 442 yards a game. Ridiculous. That's going to catch up with this football team this year. I am not sold completely on Mel Tucker here. And one reason he's going to host Ohio State in the October 8th. You can rest assured that when Ohio State goes in there, they're going to want Ryan Day is going to want Mel Tucker's hide more than anything, because Mel Tucker signed an extension that made him the highest paid coach in the Big Ten Conference. And I think he'll prove Ryan Day will that he is not the best coach in the Big Ten Conference.
Okay. Penn State. And yeah, like I said, I think you never know if they're going to have that year. And I think they have the talent to have that year. I mean, Clifford has to stay healthy. They were off to a great start last year, and then Clifford gets hurt in the Iowa game. As soon as Clifford gets hurt in the Iowa game, it changed everything for the rest of the season. So he has to stay healthy. If he does, I think they have a chance. But the running game has been an issue the last couple of years. This is a program that used to pride themselves on just a great running game and a really good offensive line. that has just disappeared the last few years. It's been mostly, they got some exciting receivers. They can throw the ball a little bit, but now Dotson's gone, so that's a big loss. Defensively, they're going to have good players on defense. They bring back, Porter and Brown in the secondary is as good as they come. Jacobs at linebacker. They always have great linebackers there. But yeah, I think it really is all about Clifford. I think if Clifford plays healthy all season, I think they got a shot. The schedule is pretty tough. The first 3 weeks, they got to go on the road twice. They also have to go on the road and play Michigan, and then they got Ohio State at home. So if they can get off to a good start, if they can win those first 5 games, beat Purdue, beat Auburn on the road, those 2 out of those 3 road games to start the season, I think they have a shot.
Well, as I mentioned before, I'm not a big James Franklin fan. They got out to this great start last football season, as you remember, 5-0. And the reason they bottomed out, they only won 2 more games. They went 2-6 from that point afterwards. It's because they were out-yarded in 6 of those 8 football games.
Sure.
They were just pushed around the field, and you can't do that when you're a 5-0 football team residing inside the Big Ten. And I think that's coaching with this football team here. I'm not high at all on this football team this year as well. Their defense is soft. It was soft last year, and they don't bring back a lot of experience that way defensively for this team. I think what benefits them the most this year, if you look at their schedule, they have no back-to-back road games. That's usually beneficial for football teams that are sort of on the mediocre bubble. It usually determines whether they'll have a good season or a bad season. It'll probably benefit Penn State that way this year. But I think in big football games, you'll find them choking like they usually have in the past.
All right. And then rounding out the division, you have Maryland, you have Indiana, and you have Rutgers. Maryland is going to be the intriguing team. Loxley is an elite recruiter, and he's kept a lot of those kids in that area at home, which has been a big deal. He's got, Taglio, what's his name's brother?
Tagovailoa?
Yeah, his brother Talia has Raheem Jarrett, Jacob Copeland, the transfer from Florida, and Dante Demas, who's coming back from injury. He's got like 3 of the best receivers on one team in all of college football. That is not an overstatement. So they're going to be very dangerous in the passing game. I don't think they have enough, though, coming back defensively. But they're going to be an exciting team. As far as Indiana, where's the real Indiana? They had big time problems last year. Tom Allen has done a nice job, but when they became the hunted, things changed. And they also had major quarterback issues. So I don't know where Indiana is. They're going to be better than they were last year because they were just really bad. And Rutgers, Greg Schiano, I have no problem believing that, as a Rutgers guy, I have no problem believing that he's going to rebuild the program like he did the first time. But just like the first time, it's just going to take some time. And the next step for Rutgers is getting that kid Gavin Wimsatt, the quarterback, under center. As soon as they do that, and he proves that he could start every week, that's when Rutgers fans can start getting excited about the future. But I think Maryland is the team to look out for out of those 3.
Well, they've got potential. There's no question. Tagovailoa, as you mentioned here, he'll be among the top quarterbacks in college football this year. If for no other reason, they might have the best wide receiving core in the Big Ten. That's a big, big factor here. A little bit like Virginia and Armstrong, who could throw the football all day long and pass for 450 yards a game.
Yeah.
You might see something similar out of Tagovailoa that way this year. They bring in Jacob Copeland from Florida, another wide receiver, to add to the mix here with their top 3 receivers back from last year. So they'll be offensively capable, this football team. I just don't know whether or not it was a mirage last year. And the reason I say that is they're one of those teams that fit that formula that we talked about yesterday, that when you have losing seasons 3 consecutive years and you finally have a winning season, you go to a bowl game and a lot more is expected from you, you sort of tend to put yourself back into the shell rather than stick your neck out. I think that could end up hurting Maryland that way this year.
And then in the West, the Wisconsin, and by the way, this division is going to change in a few years. And as a Rutgers fan, I'm happy to know that when they start bringing in USC and UCLA and so forth, no more divisions. So I'm happy about that. But for now, we have a division, and this is always the other division in the Big Ten. Wisconsin has been taking advantage of this division for some time now, and they should probably do it again. They're going to be one of the top teams. Look, this is about Graham Mertz. Will he finally prove to everybody that he's the big recruit that they were thinking they were getting a couple of years ago. Some people believe that he's going to turn around. He's going to be that guy. I got to see it because I don't see anything there. I see a kid that just seems to have mental issues when he's playing the game. He's talented, but I don't know. I just don't know. So we know he's got a great running back tandem, as they always do at Wisconsin. Braylon Allen is another in the line of great running backs. We know they're going to run. They're going to run the football because of that offensive line. The big problem with Wisconsin this year, though, is the defense. They were so good last year. They were one of the best teams on defense in college football last year. I just think they lost too much.
Well, they did lose a lot. They ranked number 94 in the country in overall returning experience on the defensive side of the football. You can sort of equate Wisconsin to Georgia in the sense that uh, in this division here, there's nobody else that's in the division that is really practically any good. Much like Georgia in the East Division here, they always, they would win if you would, because there was not a whole lot of serious competition. I think that's the same case for Wisconsin, and it might end up being that way again this football season here. If that defense can be anywhere near as good as they were last year, and they were hellacious last year, the offense can step things up here. They bring Bobby Ingram in as an offensive coordinator. And the reason I mention that is he worked with Paul Chryst together at Pittsburgh in their days together here. So they'll be like a real nice attached to the hip 1-2 combo. So that it could end up providing some offensive spark for Wisconsin this year. And if they get that spark, they will be the team to beat in this division.
And I'm surprised Jim Leonard is still there. I mean, he's going to get a head coaching gig. I don't know what everybody's waiting for, unless he eventually wants to take over for Chryst. If Chryst,
That could well be the case, right?
yeah, I don't know. But all right. By the way, on the road against Ohio State, Michigan State, Iowa, and Nebraska. So they got some tough road games. Iowa, what can you say? Kirk Ferentz just keeps on going. They get to the Big Ten championship game last year, even though they had nothing on offense. I mean, the quarterback situation was a disaster, and there's nobody new. Nobody knew a quarterback. It's the same guys from last year. It's basically the same offense as last year. So I'm not sure what that says. It's probably not very good. It's all about defense at Iowa. It's about special teams, defense, and forcing turnovers. That's the remedy for Iowa football. And because I don't see any improvement on offense this year, I just can't imagine they're going to be able to be that successful like they were on defense last year.
No, they were second only to Wisconsin that way defensively in the Big Ten Conference last year. It was their offense that really held them back last football season here. So the question is, can Spencer Petras, who started 17 games in a row before he got hurt last year, ignite this offense? It remains to be seen. The other thing about Iowa, which you get that steady job, as you mentioned, from Ferentz every year, they've lost. They lost four or more losses for the 13th time since 2005. You would think that a football team like that was in disarray or in trouble, but
Yeah.
it's not Iowa because they seem to always end up the season 7-4, 6-5, situations and things like that. They'll be the second best team in this division here once again. Very boring football team to have to watch, but they just keep grinding it out and they'll get their allotted amount of wins this season.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that there's a chance because, look, I think it comes down, like I said, when we were going over Wisconsin with Mertz. It depends if Mertz finally lives up to his status. If he
Right.
does, okay, they're going to win the division. If he doesn't, if he's the same old Mertz because of all the players that lost on defense, and I don't trust Iowa, I believe Minnesota or Nebraska could actually surprise people and win this division. PJ Fleck, we know he's done a tremendous job there. He gets Tanner Morgan back. He gets Abraham back after the injury. And even if there's another injury situation there, they're loaded at running back. They've got a couple of good receivers, wide receiver, tight end. I think they're going to be fine on offense. Defensively, I think they're going to be okay. So I think Minnesota, maybe this is their year. Look, Abraham is the guy that you really want to stay healthy though, because he's that much better and that much more explosive. And if he does, I think Minnesota can have a really exciting season. And Nebraska, look, Scott Frost, I was happy he got one more year because they keep losing so many close games. You think they're this close, they're this close, they're this close. So I admire the AD to go, okay, we're going to give you another chance because if they turn it around, if they start winning those close games, all of a sudden the momentum can go like that. I think it could happen for him this year. I love the fact they bring in Casey Thompson there, so that could help him out quarterback wise. And on defense, I think they're going to be pretty tough. That's really what's been going well for him because the offense has either held him back. Even though Martinez was exciting, he always had like the worst turnovers at the wrong time, and now he's gone. Um, I just think maybe it's time for Nebraska to win those close games. So I think Nebraska or Minnesota, one of those two teams, could actually win this division.
Well, I think Nebraska's going to challenge. In Minnesota, my biggest concern about them is the fact that they played a ton of upperclassmen last year. Only 12% of their starts were made by underclassmen, which means those players are largely gone, and they're going to have to sort of rebuild and get this job done from the ground up that way level again this year. They brought in Kirk Chiraka. He was their former offensive coordinator. He worked at West Virginia and Penn State. That should help the offense a little bit this year. You got Tanner Morgan back at quarterback. That's a nice combination here, but there's something about what is missing from Minnesota this year, and I think it's going to be the fact that they were well spent playing the highly experienced players last year. Nebraska is the football team that I think could be a really sleeper type team in the Big Ten this year. One, you mentioned Scott Frost was rehired, took a pay cut, and the reason he was rehired is simply because they couldn't afford to go out and hire another coach and pay that big money and pay off his contract as well. Okay, so they both agreed, okay, we'll give you a little less money. You can be a Big Ten coach for a little while longer here. But if you take a look at what they've got going here this year, is they're going to their first 6 games, 5 of those opponents had losing records last year. And their defense has improved each of the last 3 years under Scott Frost. You mentioned Casey Thompson comes in here. I think he'll be a big, big boost to this offense for this program here this year. I think they've got the makings here to be the surprise team in this side of the division here, and I think they'll challenge Wisconsin for the division.
Yeah, like you said, that schedule is one of the really major reasons why I think Nebraska has a shot.
Yes.
You said it. I mean, yeah, they got to play Oklahoma, but you know what? They get Oklahoma at home, and they were competitive with Oklahoma last year, and that was on the road. And yeah, so I could see that happening, and they better get off to a good start because the end of the season, Minnesota at Michigan, Wisconsin at Iowa. So you better have your bowl situations secured by then.
Absolutely. That's what they have to do. Key critical. Nebraska gets out to a good start by the middle of October. If they're not sitting with 2 losses in the season here, they could be in trouble. If they have a good start to this football season here, they could be the new kid on the block inside this division.
And then to round out, you got Purdue, Northwestern, and Illinois. Great job by Jeff Brom at Purdue. They had the big win over Michigan State last year when they were undefeated, and Purdue always does this. Purdue always pulls off those big upsets, and so that was nice. They get Aiden O'Connell back. He had a nice season, so he'll have another good year. I just think that there's just going to be okay. They're going to go to another bowl. They're going to be okay. They got the senior quarterback. I think they're going to be fine. But they're not going to be any, I don't think they're going to be one of those teams like Nebraska or Minnesota. With Northwestern and Illinois, first of all, with Northwestern, with Pat Fitzgerald, it's like, okay, he had a losing year, so he's definitely going to have a winning year, right? And that's Pat Fitzgerald. But I just got no idea what to expect. Helinski is a quarterback. Hull is a nice running back. I just don't know whether it's time now for Pat Fitzgerald to have decided to take one of those NFL jobs. But we'll see. Maybe he's got some more tricks under his sleeve, and they're going to have another good year, and nobody's anticipating it. But Illinois really intrigues me with Brett Bielema. They were a lot better last year than people thought. They have an exciting running back in Chase Brown. Tommy DeVito could be interesting at quarterback because I'm not so sure. I just think he might have been a terrible fit for Dino Babers' offense. So maybe DeVito, because their quarterback play was terrible last year. So if DeVito can give him some good quarterback play, that could be a big difference. And I think Illinois may be bowl bound this year because they were pretty close last year. So a lot's going to depend on this whole division. Is just underwhelming, like you said. And again, I even think Wisconsin could be a little underwhelming this year. So this whole division could just be topsy-turvy.
It's up for grabs. There's no question about the division. You talked about Purdue. I think they had a much better year on the field, and even the 9 wins that they showed. They win the big bowl game at the end of the season here, a big bowl win. They were a big touchdown underdog against Tennessee in the Music City Bowl. They were banged up, shorthanded, and injured, and still won the football game. That brings back a lot of confidence for a team like this. Now they're going to lose their best receiver, David Bell. He's with the Cleveland Browns right now, and he's going to make a mark in the National Football League. They're ecstatic about him in Cleveland. But Jeff Brom hardly gets outcoached in too many football games. He'll be another 7, 8, 9 win type football team this year. I believe that for sure. You mentioned Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern here. They've fallen on hard times here of late. A little bit unusual because if it wasn't Wisconsin winning that division, it was Northwestern. And right now, that's not been the case. At least last year, they've had 3 win seasons, 2 of the last 3 football seasons here. They've got to absolutely get this thing turned around here. It was their defense that really let them down last year. They've slipped 90 yards a game. So if he can shore up the defense here, he can at least get this team close back to 500 level here. And you mentioned that you like Illinois this football season here. I'm not a big Brett Bielema fan. I wasn't when he was at Wisconsin. I wasn't when he was at Arkansas. And I'm not here as well. I think the welcome mat is going to be worn out by him sooner than later at Illinois. Uh, he's been there last year, wins 5 football games. It was an improvement over the 2 that he'd won the year before. But where was the defense or the offense last year? My goodness, 327 yards a game. That doesn't cut it in the Big Ten Conference here this year. And as far as returning production goes, they rank at the very near bottom of all of college football this year, 122nd in the country. So there's not a lot of experience here that way this year as well. So maybe I'm wrong on Brett Bielema. I was wrong on Mario Cristobal. Maybe I might be wrong on Brett Bielema. But this is an Illinois football team that I'm not going to worry about having a step in front of this year.
All right, ACC. Let's talk ACC football. And in the Atlantic Division, the Clemson Tigers. Well, you can't win the ACC every year. And that's finally what happened last year, not even playing in the championship game. So, whoa, Clemson. But this ukulele kid at quarterback, that was just weird. He comes out there a couple of years ago for Lawrence, and he throws the ball over the place in a couple of games, including Notre Dame. And it's like, oh, man, just wait until Lawrence leaves. This guy might even be better. And he was terrible, terrible. And I don't want to hear things about, yeah, well, they had some inexperience here, and they weren't as good here, and they were the supporting cast there. Don't hand me that. He was terrible. So maybe it was mental. Maybe he got his, maybe he thought he was going to be a superstar too soon. I don't know. But if he plays anywhere near like that, you could actually see that kid. They got Klubnik,
Klubnik, yeah, Kate
the
Klubnik, yes.
big time recruited quarterback. I wouldn't be surprised if he winds up taking over. And if he does, and he's a superstar, okay, maybe Clemson will be fine because defensively, I don't know about. I'm not necessarily sure about the back seven. Trenton Simpson's a really good linebacker, but the secondary is going to be an issue. But they are loaded on the defensive line. I mean, you talk about Xavier Thomas. You got the Breezy kid, Miles Murphy. I mean, they are just loaded on the defensive line. Shipley is an exciting running back. Nagata at wide receiver, but they got to get good quarterback play. If they do, they're going to be very competitive. They're probably going to win this division. They might even win the conference. But I don't know whether or not they're going to be back to being Clemson dominating, Tigers football unless they get superstar quarterback play.
Well, they're going to have to get the quarterback play. I'll call him DJU because his last name is the toughest pronunciation of any of any player in college football, and he's going to have to come around this year. And if he doesn't, he's going to be on a short leash. Rest assured, Dabo Swinney will not put up with that. Even as poorly as Clemson appeared to have played last year, they still won 10 football games.
Sure.
Yeah, and they were still ranked in the top 10 in the country in overall defense last year. And the fact of the matter is, Swinney has said this looks to be the best defense he's ever had at Clemson. If that's the case, they're going to be a very, very tough team to have to play inside this ACC conference here. They're going to be angry. They're going to be mad. They're going to be playing with a chip on their shoulder with what might be the best defense in college football. They have to be the team to beat in this conference, and if they get any quarterback play, as you mentioned, they could be back in the college playoff.
Yeah, he's talking, and he does. He talks a lot, and he deserves to because he backs it up. But their defensive line is definitely as good as he says. It's the rest of the defense that's completely unproven. But yeah, they got to get good quarterback play. As far as the schedule, at Wake Forest, at Boston College, at Florida State, at Notre Dame. So there was some tough road games. They get Miami at home. Um, the, it's not a schedule though because that's tough because the non-conference crap game at all is Notre Dame, and that is on the road, and that's it. And the other thing we have to keep in mind, Clemson is not playing any SEC like probably they should be. They don't have to play that kind of schedule. So because they get to play an ACC schedule, that gives them a little bit more breathing room than if they were playing in the SEC. So yeah, I think the schedule works in their favor, but it's up to the quarterback.
Well, as you mentioned here, the past 11 years, 10 win seasons running for this football program here. They're a win machine. And, people might get tired of hearing Dabo Swinney and all the rah-rahness and everything that comes out of him. But the guy does recruit, the guy does coach, and the guy does win football games. And I think he'll be back on the winning track again this year.
Let's also point out the big story, though, that really could be a major impact, and that is the fact that for the first time in a long time, those hotshot coordinators are gone.
Yeah, it's not gonna help the football team at all. Brent Venables going over to Oklahoma, that's a big, big hole to have to fill. We rave about the defense, but when you lose a coordinator that put all that together, that could end up being a different tune. So that'll end up seeing how that plays out as well.
The new offensive coordinator is one of their former quarterbacks, Brandon Streeter. So on both sides of the ball, they have new coordinators for the first time in a long time, and we'll see how that impacts them. NC State, this is the team that I think is going to have the chance to, if Clemson doesn't do it, I don't think it's Wake Forest. I think it's NC State. Dave Dorn has done a tremendous job there. The recruiting, he always seems to find these really good players at NC State. Devin Leary came out last year and did a fantastic job. He's going to be even better this year. He's got a couple of really exciting receivers, and they've got a lot of good talent on defense. So you have a really good defense. You've got a really good quarterback, something we don't know if Clemson has. And this is the team that, if Clemson doesn't win again, this is the team that's going to do it.
Well, this is the it team this football season here because every show that I've done in the country, every host, everybody is all over NC State like white on rice, and they should be for the job that Dave Dorn did last football season, for all of what they got coming back this year. A ton of talent coming back. They're going to be very, very difficult to beat. There's no question about that. But sometimes when you're casting in this role, and their season win total was 8.5, it boomed up to 9. That means you have to win 10 games to cash that ticket here. Now, do they have 10 wins in here this football season here? That might be a stretch, but they do have a stacked deck coming back this year as far as talent is concerned.
I think they do. I think they do. Schedule wise, if you take a look, their non-conference tough one is going to be early at East Carolina, which is not easy, but they should win. And they host Texas Tech with a new coach. So those are their tough non-conference games. They should start 4-0 when they go to Clemson on October 1st.
Well, they start out 4-0. That's going to bode real well for them and their prospects. They won 9 football games last year and improved their stats really well. They did it. They did it the right way. I mean, nothing was phony about this football team last year. They appear to be better this year, so they indeed could be the team breathing down Clemson's neck.
Last year, it was Wake Forest who won the division, played in the ACC title game, and they won 11 games. And a lot of that had to do with quarterback Sam Hartman. We talked about just a little bit on yesterday's show. Still don't know exactly what's going on health-wise. Luckily, I haven't heard anything yet that says, oh, Sam Hartman's out for the year. So whatever it is, hopefully it's temporary and he'll play this year and he'll be in the right mind, whatever it is. They can't lose Sam Hartman. But if Sam Hartman plays, they're going to be very dangerous again offensively. They've got loads of offense with Hartman and A.T. Perry at receiver. They have a couple of decent players on defense. It's not as good as a defense as NC State or Clemson, and that's why they need Sam Hartman.
Unquestionably, his football team went from 4 wins to 11 wins last year, and they did it legitimately. They put up a great offense, 41 points a game on 475 yards a contest. There's nothing fluky at all about what it is they did. They outyarded their opponents handily in most football games. They're going to have, as you mentioned, Hartman to improve any at all on that. Uh, he's got A.T. Perry, wide receiver, coming back here. That will help this football program, but it's all going to revolve around Hartman. What he does is going to be the success for this football program here. I don't think they'll surpass the 11 wins they had last year, even if he were to play all season long, but they'll still be a very good football team.
Three potential sleepers in this division: Louisville, Florida State, and then you have Boston College. And with Louisville, it's about Malik Cunningham, very exciting, athletic quarterback. Not sure um, whether or not they have enough though on defense. That's where I'm a little bit concerned. They do have a couple players here and there like Abdullah and Clark and even Quincy Riley. So they have a trio of really dynamic players. They're going to have to really step up overall. And Cunningham is one of the better quarterbacks in the conference. That's going to help him out. We know Satterfield can coach. So I like the direction this Louisville program is going. And this could be, and probably should be, Satterfield's best year. Schedule wise, they got to go to Central Florida. They also host South Florida as far as outside the conference. And they, other than that, James Madison. And then the biggest non-conference game is their yearly end of the season matchup with Kentucky.
Yeah, this is a Louisville football team here. I think it's going to be sneaky good this year. There's 6.5 wins for the season win total, and I think that's one of my overplays that you have to consider this year. Malik Cunningham coming back will be a fourth-year starter, a lot like Desmond Ridder was at Cincinnati. And the stats this football team is putting up, they're consistently good year after year under Satterfield. He made his mark at Appalachian State. We talked about that earlier, and he got him this job here at Louisville. This team has averaged better than 440 yards a game, have Satterfield's teams here. They're not going to be lacking at all for offense here. The question is, can they defensively stop the other opponent here? They're the funny football team that, if you will, that they would win the yards and lose the games. And it's like you made me scratch my head. It's the opposite of Andy Reid. In Andy Reid's heyday, he would win games and get outstatted. And Louisville was doing the opposite here. They were winning the stats and losing football games. That has got to change for this football program. It changed a little bit last year, and if it does that way this year, I think they could be a real surprise sleeper team this year.
And then the other team that could be a surprise is Mike Norville and Florida State. I know things didn't look good early last year. The first year under Norville, they win 3 games. They start out 0-4, and everybody's wondering if he's going to get fired any week now. They turned things around. If they would have beaten Florida at a very close game at the end of the season, they would have gone to a bowl. So I think Mike Norville's got them headed in the right direction. Jordan Travis comes back at quarterback, so he has to take that next step. They do lose a couple of big players on defense, including Jermaine Johnson, who was a first-round draft pick. But Jamie Robinson is a spectacular player in the secondary. I just think Mike Norville is the right coach, and I think Florida State is going to get better. They're going to go a bowl this year. Again, once it's going to be up to that quarterback position and offense. I just don't think they have enough on offense yet. And I'm not sure Travis is that guy. But as soon as he gets a really good quarterback, then I think at that point you can take a look at Florida State as maybe a true contender.
Well, Travis transfers in from Louisville, where he couldn't break through beyond Malik Cunningham, so he can benefit from this position here with Mike Norville and Florida State. The good news for Florida State is a third of their starts last year were made by freshmen. That's the third highest in the country. And that's that formula that I love doing when these young kids get all those starts and they come back the next year. This could be that breakthrough year for Florida State. And Bobby Bowden is probably rolling over in his grave when he reads the fact that after 41 winning seasons, this team has suffered 4 straight losing seasons. Who would have ever thought that with this Florida State football program? But I think it ends here this year. I think Mike Norvell was a good hire for this program, and we'll see the results this season.
And then Boston College is the other potential sleeper because of Jerkovich at quarterback. There's a possibility if he stays healthy based on his size and his arm strength they could be a first round draft pick. That's the kind of talent he is. But everything's got to go well. He's got to stay healthy. He's got a good running back, as they often do. He's got an exciting receiver in Zay Flowers. So if he could stay healthy, they're going to have a dangerous quarterback. The question I have is whether or not they have enough on defense. I don't really look and see a whole lot of playmakers on defense, guys that stand out. They're going to be competitive. They're going to go to a bowl. And because they have Jerkovich, they could be interesting. Um, but I think maybe Hafley just needs a little bit more time. Unfortunately, if Jerkovich stays healthy and they do have a decent season, he's probably going to go pro. And then it's almost like starting over again. But I do think Hafley's the right guy.
He is the right guy, and Jerkovic could be the guy to lead them to the promised land. He's that talented. As far as they're concerned for the success this football season, as you mentioned, it has to happen on the defense. The defensive line's got 6 players back that played a lot of snaps the last two football seasons here. The secondary finished third in the country in passing defense. So if they can put some glue in between those two at the linebacker position here and shore that defense up, this football team could be a little bit of a surprise in the ACC.
And then Syracuse rounds out the division, and Dino Babers. They got close last year. They really did. I thought that they were going to maybe get that bowl, which would have really been big for Babers. It didn't happen. So this is now going to be his last chance. I don't think there's any question that if he doesn't go to a bowl, he's not going to be back. Schrader's back at quarterback. I think he's the right quarterback for the system. And Sean Tucker is one of the best running backs in the entire country. So they need like an 1,800-yard season from Sean Tucker in order for them to have a shot in this division. I like some of the players they have in the back seven on defense. I think a lot's going to depend on the schedule, and the schedule does give them some potential games that they might be able. I mean, for instance, if they can knock off Purdue at home on September 17th. Maybe that's the type of win that can get them to a bowl.
This football team's got the chance to really surprise a lot of people this football season here. Dino Babers, number one, is in the hottest of all hot seats, as you mentioned. He's got to win or he's gone. What he did last year is not a single upperclassman started a football game last year. He went with the kids last year, and that's going to benefit him this football season here for doing just that. But the proof to me in the pudding is the fact that in doing that last year, this football team was 1 in 17 in the yards, meaning they were outstatted in 17 of their 18 previous games. Last year, they went 5 and 3 in the stats. That's dramatic improvement. And if that improvement continues this year, look for Syracuse to get over that 4.5 win total, and Dino Babers saves his job.
All right. Now let's get to the other division where the Miami Hurricanes might end up being the team to beat. I think they are, because no longer is the best quarterback at Pittsburgh. Now it's at Miami with Tyler Van Dyke. And look, there's a lot of talk that Tyler Van Dyke, not sure exactly how much time Miami's going to have with Van Dyke if he has a really big year, NFL calling and all that kind of stuff. But Tyler Van Dyke is a heck of a prospect. He's like that old school pocket passer, strong arm, big guy, and they're going to have a pretty good offense. The question on offense is they lose their 2 top wide receivers, so they're going to have to count on transfers and other unproven receivers. But the talent's there. And defensively, I think the secondary is going to be the strength of the defense, but the front seven, they don't have the players yet. That's okay. I think they still have enough to win the division. Probably not enough to win the overall ACC title game. But you have Mario Cristobal there, and being in South Florida, it's just they're the fans just feel like they've just got Santa Claus came back and gave them the biggest present ever. Another chance at having a run of just greatness. And I don't think Mario Cristobal, if he's successful, he's not going anywhere unless an NFL team wants him. He's staying at Miami for as long as he has to.
Well, he can probably write his own ticket here. Like I mentioned in the show when we previewed the Group of 5 teams yesterday, a lot of the former alumni are rallying around the program here. Michael Irvin, he's at almost every practice working with the wide receivers. That's great to see that stuff, okay? But what I think is going to help Tyler Van Dyke this year is what I'm reading is they may have the best running backs in the conference, Miami of Florida. Now, if they do, that'll help Van Dyke obviously set up the offensive attack, which would be really, really good. We talked about Mario Cristobal, what a great job he's done recruiting. He'll continue to keep doing that. He's doing that now in the state of Florida. He's out recruiting all the other Florida schools here. This is a football team you got to put on your radar list because they can make some noise this
Yeah, I
year.
think, like you said, if they're going to get over the hump, especially offensively, some of those skill position players that they're saying look really good that haven't really been completely proven yet, well, that's what we have to see, with our own eyes. Schedule-wise, they're at Texas A&M, September 17th. So we'll
Yep.
find out how good they are, and they also got to go to Clemson. So that's tough, but they do avoid NC State at least. Okay, Pittsburgh. Pat Narduzzi did a tremendous job and has done with this program, and it finally paid off. Pickett, the quarterback, winning the ACC championship, but now no more Pickett. At least they made a nice move, bringing in Keaton Slovis from USC. Unfortunately, Addison leaves and goes to USC. The Bolitnikov winner at wide receiver. There's still, pretty good talent on offense, and if Slovis has a really good season, minus Mark Whipple, by the way, the offensive coordinator, okay, I could see Pitt competing again because they're always going to be really good on defense.
Well, they're supposed to be good on defense because it's a Pat Narduzzi football team. But take a look in the 4-year stat review in the Playbook Football Preview Guide magazine, and you'll see that the defense has regressed each of the last 2 football seasons. He's put a lot more of the emphasis on the offense because he had Kenny Pickett there, and he took advantage of doing just that. He's going to have to shore things up defensively and get back to Pat Narduzzi defense, if you will. They held teams to only 5.1 yards a play last year. That was good, but they giving up too many chunks of yards, big plays, and doing stuff like that. It's a football team that everybody has got on their radar this year, but I think it's for the wrong reasons. I know they brought Keaton Slovis in from Southern Cal when Jackson Dart took his job away from him. So that's good news. The bad news is they lost Jordan Addison. He was the Fred Bolitnikov award-winning wide receiver last year, and he's now at Southern Cal. He was Pickett's go-to guy, and he's no longer there. So they're going to have to fill that hole on the offense. I just think there's too much adulation out there right now for the Pitt Panthers here, and I see them not getting to the 8.5 season win total.
Yeah, the beginning of the schedule is kind of tough. They get West Virginia, they host Tennessee, and then they go to Western Michigan, who beat them last year. But if they can win 2 out of the 3, and maybe they win all 3, they could be 6-0 when they go to Louisville. So it's a pretty decent schedule, but that Tennessee game in week 2 is going to be the tough one, especially since they upset Tennessee last year.
Well, one little interesting stat on them that I think people will like who like the Pitt Panthers is our stat you will like inside the magazine. And it's simply this, that the Pitt Panthers have won more than 10 games 4 times in their school history. They followed those 4 more than 10 win seasons up with 9, 11, 11, and 9 wins. So that bodes well for them that way this year. But I have my reservations about Narduzzi and where the defense is going.
Okay. Now, the rest of the division, not looking all that strong. Maybe North Carolina is the team because of Mac Brown, but he is going to have so many new faces on offense besides Josh Downs at wide receiver. So, hey, you know what? If he strikes gold with another young quarterback, okay, maybe. But unless that happens, I think they're maybe starting to turn the corner back to where Mac Brown realizes if I'm going to compete, I got to get better on defense. So maybe it was about Sam Howell on the offense the last couple of years. I could see North Carolina turning back to being more of a defensive team. So I think it's a transition year because of that. Virginia Tech has a new head coach, so I have no idea what to expect there. They get the Marshall transfer quarterback. It's not going to be pretty probably. Virginia, they get a first-year head coach. We talked about Clemson losing their coordinators. Tony Elliott, the offensive coordinator, goes to Virginia. You mentioned Brennan Armstrong at quarterback. They're going to have a ton of points again this year. The problem is they gave up a ton of points, and I don't think that's going to change very much. And Jeff Collins, it's a hard gig at Georgia Tech. I think he's the right coach. I know the fans aren't happy with him, but Jeff Sims is an exciting quarterback. I think they're going to be a little bit better this year. And then Duke has a new head coach, and Mike Elko with Cutcliffe gone. they're not going to be very good. So there's a lot of teams there. There's a 4 or 5 teams that probably aren't going to be very good this year.
Well, the team of all the teams you mentioned, if one of them ends up with a winning season, that will be good. Good news for one of those football teams. Most likely Virginia because of Brennan Armstrong. He's a dynamic quarterback. He can fill the air with yards and touchdowns and all those good things, but they're going to have to play a lot better brand of defense. You mentioned Virginia Tech coming into here. Last season, they were very, very young. They started 174 games, did the underclassmen. That was sixth most in the country. So they could improve that way this year because of doing something just like that. North Carolina, I mean, unbelievably, they lost so many games last year as favorites. It was unbelievable. 5 times they were favored in football games, and they got the rug pulled out them in 5 different football games. And the coup de grace came when they lost to South Carolina as 13-point favorites in the Duke's Mayo Bowl game. So right now, obviously, Mac Brown has got a lot of work to do ahead of him, and he could end up struggling again this football season unless he learns from his all the mistakes that they made last football season here. So out of that whole group, I would say Virginia would most likely be the team that would have a winning
All
season.
right, and by the way, Elliott hired Air Force's defensive coordinator to be the defensive coordinator at Virginia, and we know how good Air Force's defense has been the last few years. So if they can play a little bit of defense, then you're probably right that because of Armstrong, Virginia is that team. All right, let's now move to the Big 12, and well, the Oklahoma Sooners. Is this still Oklahoma Sooners territory? Uh, Riley's gone, and it didn't mean the NFL. It meant USC. So how surprising, I guess, was that? Who knows? But nowadays, college coaches can make more than NFL coaches, so probably not a big surprise. But Oklahoma turns to Brent Venables. And we just talked about it with Elliott and now with Venables. So this is where the Clemson coordinators have gone. So Oklahoma, Dylan Gabriel will be the quarterback. So Gabriel is the quarterback. He's going to be reunited with the offensive coordinator, Levy, who was coordinator with Central Florida with Gabriel. So that is a good deal to bring in that kind of chemistry with quarterback, with coordinator right off the bat. You know they're going to have no problem offensively with the skill position players like Eric Gray and Marvin Mims. I just think the big question is going to be on defense. He lost a couple of really stout defenders up front. And that's always been kind of the part of the offense, the part of the team that's held them back generally. So it's really going to take Brent Venables' magic on defense to get this team to be productive on both sides of the ball. But, coaching staff is good, offensive, explosive. They're going to be one of the top teams to beat as usual.
Well, they're going to have to find a way to come somewhere close, in a sense, to what the Oklahoma offense has been in the past. We know Venables is going to have that good defense, as you mentioned. That's in his blood. It's in his DNA. But they're going to have to open up an attack here. Last year, they were number 1 in the country in red zone offense last year. That won't be the case this year. I can guarantee you that, with Caleb Williams gone and Lincoln Riley not calling the shots. But it was a good pickup to bring Dylan Gabriel in here from Central Florida. He put up a lot of yards with that football program here, so he'll fit real well. The interesting stat that I came across about Oklahoma is they've won 4 more Big 12 championships in the last 23 years than they've suffered home losses. They only have 15 home losses in that way. So this football team knows how to win championships, and they don't lose games at home. If Venables can do that, keep the home slate clean, they could end up being the team to beat again this year.
Sticking inside the state, we have the Oklahoma State Cowboys, this close to not only winning the Big 12 championship, but being a playoff team. They could not get it done. Mike Gundy had a fantastic year last year, but we mentioned before, Knowles is gone. The defensive coordinator's off to Ohio State. And not only is Knowles gone, but they lose several key players on defense. They do get Colin Oliver back, who was a freshman sensation for them, so that's cool. But and Spencer Sanders, a quarterback, he's a good college quarterback. But overall, I just can't see them having the type of season they had last year, especially when you lose such a good coach like Knowles. I think they're going to take a couple of steps back this year.
I think they'll take a step backwards here this year as well. They're going to bring Derek Mason in from Vanderbilt as their new defensive coordinator here this football season here. And the returning production that they're suffering from this year and the transfer portal come up really short for this football program last year. The combination of the two, I think, sends Oklahoma State one step back this year.
Baylor, meanwhile, they lose some key players also on defense. I think a couple of the guys that I remember they lost, they're losing Bernard. They're losing the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, Petrie. So they got some really big shoes to fill on defense. They've got a couple of good players on defense, and Dave Aranda is a genius defensive coordinator and now a head coach at Baylor, and he did a tremendous job winning the Big 12 championship last year. It's all going to come down to quarterback Blake Shapen and whether or not they have enough on offense because they lost a couple of key players on that side of the ball.
Yeah, Dave Aranda did a great job with this football program last year. They really, really surprised everybody in the country to the point where they had Charlie Brewer transferred out of the program because of the great quarterback play and the great coaching they got last year. But again, we're going to use that phrase again. Now they're the hunted instead of the hunter, which they did last year, and they caught teams by surprise. I don't know whether Aranda's got 2 years in a row doing just that. He's short on returning experience this year. Only 12 starters are back this year. They do return 3 defensive linemen from a year ago last year. That's good news. But I think because of what they did last year, everybody's going to want a piece of the Baylor Bear this season.
Yeah, I think there's too much of a drop off as well. At BYU, by the way, September 10th. That's going to be a tough one.
Yes.
Okay, Texas. What kind of a year is Texas going to have? We talked a little bit about it yesterday because we were talking rankings, and some crazy guy decided that Texas was the #1 team in the country on the coach's side. Steve Sarkisian, we know he can recruit, but he's never proven that he's a really good head coach. He's just proven he's a really good recruiter. But that's what Texas needs right now. They got to recruit, and it's Texas. It's a fertile ground of Texas, so they should be able to recruit. It's all going to come down to the quarterback from Ohio State. If this kid's the real deal, they are going to be really explosive on offense. I just don't think they have enough on defense yet.
I don't think they do have enough on defense. And, all of what is going on there right now, who was the person we talked yesterday that voted Texas #1 in the country to win in the AP or in the college coaches preseason poll? My goodness.
Brett Venables.
Yeah, well, that's what we think it might have been. But anyway, I think there's too much pressure on Texas here this football season. I know they're in a rebound year. It should be a mission-type season for this football team here. But you've got some players that are missing here this year. Casey Thompson, we talked about before. Cade Brewer, their tight end, is gone. I just think there's too much pressure here. And they've also got now Quint Ewers, the quarterback that transferred over from Ohio State. He was in Texas. He went to Ohio State. He's back in Texas here again this year. He's going to have to step up and prove himself this year. The issue with this football team is they weren't as bad last year as their record indicated because 5 of their losses were by 8 or fewer points. That makes them that mission team this year. But I still think there's too much pressure on them. A lot of people having them win the Big 12. I'm not one of them.
And they did lose to Kansas last year.
Yes. Yeah. The 34-point favorite. Go figure.
But look, Bijan Robinson, a running back, Worthy, Winnington, and Nair, the transfer at wide receiver. They got good tight ends. It's all up to the Ohio State quarterback. If he can play well, they're going to score a ton of points, but I just don't think they got the defense. Alabama, September 10th, coming to Texas. So you better get them now because I'm sure they got to go to Alabama next year probably or the year after. But, hey, we'll know how quickly Texas is for real when they take on Alabama on September 10th.
Yeah, that'll be the true telling tale, but and I think that'll also expose Texas as well because there's a huge coaching mismatch in that game, Sarkisian against Nick Saban.
The 2 sleepers in the conference, Kansas State and Iowa State. And isn't it nice that we can call Iowa State a sleeper again? Because when all of a sudden last year, it was supposed to be the year they were going to knock down the door. They had everybody back, including Brock Purdy. This was their year. And it was the worst year for Iowa State in like 3 or 4 years. So now they're back to being a sleeper team. And if the kid, the young quarterback can be as good as they're hoping, then maybe that could help them surprise as many people as they're going to need to. Kansas State, meanwhile, I've been big Chris Kleiman fan. I think this is clearly his best team. He's got Deuce Vaughn, transfers in Adrian Martinez. He's got Malik Knowles. So they got exciting three players on offense. And on defense, they got some really good talent as well. So this is his best team. It would not surprise me to see Kansas State or Iowa State contend for the Big 12 championship and play in the championship game.
I'm 100% on that same train with you. I'm like a big Chris Kleiman fan as well. I know a lot of people don't dig Adrian Martinez at Nebraska. He turned the ball over too many times. I agree with that. But the fact of the matter is the kid set 17 school records while he was there, and he's one of only 4 active quarterbacks that have passed for 8,000 yards and rushed for 1,000 yards. He will be dynamic in this offense here for Kleiman this football season here. And what I really like about this team is the change they made on defense last year. They went to a 4-man front, or from a 4-man front to a 3-man front. And what had happened? They shaved 11 points off of their points allowed and 100 yards per game on their allow average. If that continues with that football defense this year, like you say, I think this team can challenge for the Big 12 championship.
All right, and then you've got TCU and West Virginia. I think are in the same boat because they got Sonny Dykes is now going to be there for his first year. The longtime head coach Patterson is gone, so maybe it was time for a change. I don't know though. Quarterback situation is pretty good. I think I like the competition here. Kendre Miller and Quentin Johnson are explosive at running back and wide receiver. So if they get good quarterback play, TCU could be interesting because they usually field a pretty good defense. Sonny Dykes is not a bad head coach, at least where he has coached before. But I don't know. They're a mystery team still, but they've got talent.
Well, they've got talent. The problem is their defense really kind of shredded last year, and Dykes is going to have to patch that up this football season here. And they were 122nd against the run in the country last year. That won't work in the Big 12 conference. And Dykes is not a defensive genius. He brings in Joe Gillespie as his defensive coordinator from Tulsa. That should help a little bit that way this year. But he's got big shoes to have to fill here in Chris Patterson, Gary Patterson, I should say. 21 years, only 4 losing seasons at TCU. I don't know about this. I know he's bringing a ton of talent back on offense. 10 starters are coming back that way for this football team. 6.5 wins for their season win total. If Dykes strikes up the offense and at least any at all improves that defense, they can get over those 6.5 wins.
Neil Brown at West Virginia. I could see another bowl season. He gets JT Daniels, the USC Georgia guy who can't stay healthy. But if he stays healthy, that's good news. Dante Stills is an explosive defender. Again, I don't think they have a whole lot else. I see they have talent. I think they'll win a few games. They'll go to a bowl, but I can't really expect more than that.
Well, Neil Brown was expected to do a lot more than he did. He had 3 consecutive double-digit winning seasons at Troy, and he was a real nice hire when they brought him in here, but just 1 winning season. 17-18 overall at West Virginia for 3 years. It's going to have to get better for Neil Brown here real quick. The good news is JT Daniels transfers in. He's college football's transfer cover boy. It seems every year he's going to a new school and they'll talk about a 5-star recruit, and he couldn't beat out Stetson Bennett at Georgia, but he ends up here at right now with West Virginia this football season. But they do bring Graham Harrell in here as a new offensive coordinator and the quarterback coach. If he works well with Daniels, that could be a real spark for this football team. The biggest problem I see, though, is if you take a look at their final 7 games of the season, 6 of them are against teams that were in bowl games last year, which clearly means that they have to get off to a good start this football season here if they wish to become a winning team this year.
Texas Tech, it's going to take some time for Joey McGuire to rebuild. They're going to go back to being a run-and-shoot team. They went to Matt Wells. He tried to turn him over to more of a defensive team. They didn't like that there, so they're going back. They probably weren't selling tickets. So now they're going back to being more of an explosive team. But yeah, they get the Oregon transfer. He'll probably be the quarterback, but it's asking too much. I actually think I wouldn't be surprised if Kansas finished ahead of Texas Tech this year because, you and I, we're both big Lance Leipold fans, and I could see Kansas taking a step up. They won 2 games last year. I could see them winning 4 or 5 this year.
From what I'm hearing, Greg, and it's from people that are kind of in the know in the Big 12 conference here. A lot of people think Texas Tech is going to be surprisingly
Really?
good this football season. Yes, they do. This Joey McGuire is probably not well known, but he is in the at least in the high school football glory in the state of
That'll
Texas
help
here.
recruiting.
Exactly. He'll recruit that state like all get out. And also, he's bringing in some former Baylor assistants with him here as well. If Oregon's Tim DeRuyter is his defensive coordinator here. So if things go well and people overlook this football program here, they could end up pulling the rug on teams here. 5.5 wins for their season win total. If they hit six, I'm not going to be
All
surprised.
right, we'll keep an eye on Texas Tech. And then, like I said, Kansas. They found the right coach. I don't think there's any question about
Yes.
that. It's going to take them time, though.
Well, it's going to take them time. They feel really good about what they did last year. You mentioned that monster upset in Austin last year, winning as a 30-point underdog there. That's going to be a big, big boost for confidence for this football program this year. And they're bringing 17 starters back with a very, very well coached team. You've got 2.5 wins for your season win total here. I think you add up all the ingredients. I think Kansas wins 3 games and cashes that
Yeah,
ticket.
that's exciting. exciting. Let's finish our preview with the Pac-12. We'll start with the champs from the South, Utah. Kyle Whittingham's been around for a long time, and he gets rewarded with his Pac-12 championship last year. He gets Cameron Rising back at quarterback. He gets his running back returning. He gets both tight ends back. He gets, I believe his leading receiver returns, his number 2 receiver, because Covey, who was there for like 100 years, finally left in the NFL. And they're always going to be good on defense. They unfortunately lose Devin Lloyd. That is a major loss, but there's a lot of talent coming back on defense, including they get Florida transfer linebacker Diabate. So, yeah, Utah is going to be really good again. The question's going to be, with Rising coming back, can they do more? Can they be a playoff team?
Well, that's a good question. There's some people think that they could be the sleeper team to crash the party this year. They won the Pac-12 last year, so can they duplicate that effort here again this year? A big, big factor that works in their favor is that no team in the FBS started more underclassmen than did Utah last year. Number 1 in the country, 67.5% of their starts were made by underclassmen last year. That means they're all coming back with all that success and all that confidence. There's a lot of people that really, really love Utah. My biggest concern is they climbed the mountain last year. Can they stay there this year? Because I think there's a couple of other teams in this conference that are going to be
Yeah,
improved.
schedule-wise, they got a huge opener at Florida. That is a major game. If they
Yes.
want a championship, if they want to get to the playoffs, they have to win that game. They can't lose it. And that's the
Yep.
thing. When you're in the Pac-12, you really have to go undefeated, unless you lose to a powerhouse team like Alabama or Georgia, and then run the table. So schedule-wise, they get host San Diego State, also a non-conference, and in the conference, Oregon on the road. So I just think it's going to be tough unless they get a break and they can somehow find a way to get to the playoffs with just one loss.
Well, the one thing that helps them the most is hosting Southern Cal rather than traveling there. That could be beneficial for them in their favor here as well. So if they can take care of business and win the games they're supposed to, because they'll be favored in just about every game they play this year, perhaps other than the Southern Cal game, that's going to probably be a real pick'em type football game. They could have another monster
And
year.
speaking of Southern Cal, Lincoln Riley's in town, so you know what? It's going to happen fast. They're going to be back to being like Pete Carroll and USC before long. Could be this year. He brings in Caleb Williams, Travis Dye. He brings in Austin Jones, Jordan Addison, Mario Williams. I mean, right there. I mean, these are all new guys, and they're all explosive offensive weapons. But the problem is, even though we brought in a lot of transfers on defense as well, most of the star players that he brought in were offensive guys. I still don't think USC has the players on defense to compete with the big boys yet.
And that's a 400-yard defense you're talking about here. You cannot win conference championship games with 400-yard defenses. I'm going to repeat that over and over again. It just doesn't work. You can't outscore opponents and let them go toe-to-toe with you defensively. It doesn't work. And, Oklahoma was never known for their defense. They were good
They got
under
better.
Lincoln
Yeah,
Riley.
Alex Grinch did a good job there for a couple of
Yes.
years, and he does follow Riley over to USC.
Yeah, exactly. He brings a lot of his coaching staff with him here that way this year as well. So there's people that have them as the team to beat in the conference this year, probably likely so. But the truth of the matter is, all these pieces of the puzzle are going to have to mesh for that to happen for Southern Cal this year.
Now Fresno State, that's going to be a tricky one on September 17th at home as a non-conference. They also host Notre Dame at the end of the season non-conference, and in the conference they got to go to Utah, UCLA, and Oregon State. So
It's not an easy schedule.
All right, next up, speaking of UCLA, Chip Kelly. They had themselves a really nice year last year, finally, under Chip Kelly. He does bring DTR back at quarterback, so that's good. And he brings Charbonneau back at running back. That's good. Unfortunately, he loses a couple of big pieces. He loses his number one receiver, Kyle Phillips. He uses his big-time tight end, Greg Dulcich. So that's going to hurt a little bit. Defense, they brought in several really key transfers. That, I think, is going to be the big difference. But, it's good to see UCLA winning again. We'll find out whether or not they can make it 2 years in a row.
I wonder why Dylan Gabriel decommitted. Maybe it was because he felt he wasn't going to get past Dorian Thompson-Robinson at the quarterback slot. I don't know. But the truth of the matter is they got a running back that is going to be in the National Football League, Zach Charbonneau, I believe it's pronounced.
Yep.
Yeah, ran for 1,100 yards last football season, 13 touchdowns. They finally snapped that 5-year losing streak last year. So, do they fit that bill, that formula where loser, 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 winner? Do they go back to where they came from, or do they keep moving forward here that way this year? There's a lot on the line here right now for Chip Kelly. I think if he doesn't get the job done, he'll be in a really, really hot seat. He was on one last year and he responded. We'll see what this football team does this year.
Schedule was good because they don't have anybody non-conference to worry about. They're all cupcakes. So because of that, they should be bowl eligible again this year.
Well, you mentioned cupcakes. Look at that stat you will like in the Playbook Preview Guide magazine. Chip Kelly in his career against losing teams, 23-1 straight up and 17-5 to the spread. So that'll probably help him along the way.
And then the rest of the teams are going to fight for the bottom, and they're going to be battling for a bowl at best. That's Arizona State, Arizona, Colorado. And when you take a look at those teams, the reason Arizona State's taken a step back because of the violations, so everybody transferred out. So it's look, Herm Edwards kept his job, but you got coaching changes, coordinators, players that are gone. He was lucky enough to bring in Emory Jones, the quarterback from Florida, and the running back from Wyoming, Valladay. So that's good. But I just think there's so much turmoil that it's going to be hard for them to go to a bowl. I'm a big fan of what's going on in Arizona with Jed Fish. This is a team that I'm going to be wagering on this year to pull off a couple of upsets. So I'm going to be taking one of those 15-point dog games, 20-point dog games, and I think they're going to pull off an upset or two. And Carl Durrell, I think he's going to get Colorado back to playing better football than last year because last year's offense was just atrocious.
Well, you mentioned Arizona State, and it is a lot of revolving doors going on at that program right now, and to the point where Edwards even hired Brian Billick to come in as an offensive analyst and become an advisor to himself, the head coach here. So, can they patch this up? That remains to be seen. They lose their Jaden Daniels. That's really, really a big, big loss for this football program here. Arizona is a football team like you. I will be on this year as well. Last year, they were the worst team in college football in net turnover margin. And you know what? We talk about that. What goes down comes up, and what goes vice versa as far as that is concerned. That will really help this football program this year. They got Jaden DeLora, a 4-star quarterback, a 2-year starter with Washington State. He comes in here. He knows the Pac-12, which is really, really helpful. You get transfers. They usually come from other conferences or other areas in the country. He comes from the Pac-12 conference, which is really, really going to be beneficial for this team here. I think he's a huge pickup for this program here. And I think this football team gets over their season win total here this year. They were priced a little bit low this year, but I think this football program is going to be out in the bowl game by season's
And they
end.
also land the star receiver from UTEP, Jacob Cowing. So that was a big transfer pickup as well to
Yes.
Arizona. Moving on over to the opposite division and Oregon. You know, you got Lanning. We talked about it with the Georgia matchup. So Lanning is at Oregon. You know he's going to recruit just like Cristobal. So you know that's just gonna and he probably even does a better job because he's one of the best in the entire country. He brings in Bo Nix, the Auburn quarterback. I don't know. I mean, Bo Nix is okay, but I don't know. He can be either. He could be really good and he could be really inconsistent. So I don't know what to expect from Bo Nix. Noah Sewell is an elite defender. They've got some really good players, but I don't know if they have enough in year one. He might need at least a year, but we're all excited to see how they measure up week one against Georgia.
Well, you mentioned Bo Nix. You don't know what you're going to get from him. He's that Forrest Gump quarterback, if you will. He could be very, very good, or he can, be very, very erratic. There's a reason he's no longer at Auburn. But the fact of the matter is, he threw for over 7,000 yards at Auburn, and they say he was outstanding in spring this year as well. So that's good news for Oregon here. Dan Lanning, I think, was a good hire for this team here. You mentioned the former defensive coordinator at Georgia here, also an assistant in Alabama, so he's got a lot of pedigree inside of him. I don't know if this football program improves from where they were last year, but I think they got a good chance of being a solid team this year.
Not yet ready for a playoff, though, correct?
Not ready for the playoff. There's no. It's a question of whether or not they're going to be even ready to challenge for the Pac-12 is what it is. So they're not ready for a playoff. No,
All right,
no.
staying in the state, Oregon State, Jonathan Smith. We talked about it last year. Big fan, loved to turn around, expected to turn around over the last couple of years. They finally got it, went to a bowl, and now they're going to be better this year. So this is really a little sneaky team to keep an eye on in this division. That matchup against Oregon, they're at home this year at the end of the season against Oregon. That could be for the division. That's how good Oregon State's going to be. Chance Nolan's back at quarterback. They got some pretty good players coming back on defense. Most of their top players are back, matter of fact, on defense. So I think sky's the limit. I think Oregon State is going to be there at the very end and might surprise people and actually play in the Pac-12 championship game.
Well, they check a lot of boxes this year, Greg, and for the right reasons. They did a lot of good things last year. It was their first winning season since 2013, which means will they revert or will they continue their moving forward here? They averaged 6.4 yards per play on offense last year. That's really good news. I think the better news here, though, however, is this football program here. They've got a quarterback in Chance Nolan who's really good, but they got a stud freshman running back named Damian Martinez, and they say that this kid is special. Just to say to quote them, he's a very smooth runner, effortless with the football in his hands. He makes guys miss on every play, and he's all over the film. If this kid develops as well as he can, along with Chance Nolan, this football team can continue upward. If they don't, they're going to probably regress.
One thing I'm worried about is the schedule. Their first two games are against two of the best teams in the Mountain West Conference. They host Boise State, then they go to Fresno State in week 2, and then 2 weeks later, USC, and then at Utah.
Yeah, it's a little bit tough, I'd say, to say the least. But again, you're gonna do that in the Pac-12 because most teams are formidable, not necessarily overpowering, but any those are the types of games that any team can win, and you wouldn't be surprised. I think it's manageable for this football team, and I'm like you, I'm a big fan of head coach Jonathan Smith. I think he's doing a great job with this program. He's brought them back to relevance, especially having taken them to a bowl game last year.
Now I think it's time to get serious about Washington because they made a good hire in Kalen DeBoer. So whether or not it could happen overnight, I don't know if they have enough talent. They bring in Michael Penix, the quarterback from Indiana, who actually had his best year at Indiana when DeBoer was their offensive coordinator. So there's a lot.
That's a great point.
Yeah, there's a lot of chemistry they like there. But Penix has to stay healthy, and so we don't know if he can or not. And they're always a good defensive team. They got 2 studs up front that everybody's excited about in the NFL. But I don't know. Again, it's a new coach. I don't know about the quarterback position. I don't know if he can stay healthy. There's talent there. They're a mystery team still, but they're definitely a potential contender for the title.
Yeah, that matchup is really nice. DeBoer and Penix being back together again. That's really, really nice to see. This program needed a big shot in the arm because when Jimmy Lake was fired here, this program was going nowhere. They were really bottoming out. They were one of the best football programs inside the Pac-12 conference, and they were becoming one of the worst conferences. They dipped to as low as 4-8 after being a number 20 ranked team in 2020. So I think it all works in their favor for them this football season here. And if this combination between Penix and DeBoer works real well, this football team could go bowling this year.
Stanford, David Shaw. I think this is it.
Oh,
I think if Stanford does not go to a bowl this year, I think David Shaw. Look, if Stanford doesn't want to fire him, I think he should resign. They're just not getting anything going on here. I don't care about 4-2 pandemic year. That's nothing. They've won 4 and in 3 games, 7 games the last 2 full seasons. That's just not getting it done. I don't know what's going on there. They've lost momentum recruiting. And this is a year where they've got a quarterback in Tanner McKee. The kid's got a lot of talent. They've got a couple of good weapons on offense. They should be productive on offense. They really should if that offensive line can go back to being the traditional, really good Stanford offensive line. And they have a couple of good linemen. So I expect this team, if they're going to ever have a chance to get some of that magic back with David Shaw, this is the year offensively. I just don't know if they have enough horses on defense.
you sound like the athletic director who brought David Shaw into his office and laid it out for him and told him exactly what's going to happen. And you hit it right on the head. He's going to have to deliver here. This is a team that won 40 games in 4 years from 2015 to 2018. And you go back the last 3 years, they've only won 10 games combined. They've fallen off the map. It's unbelievable what's happened to this program. It probably has to do with recruiting. That'd be my first best guess. He does have a good quarterback coming back here, and but their defense here ranked last in the Pac-12 in scoring defense. They allowed over 32 points a game, 6.5 yards per play. The clock is ticking right now on David Shaw, and it's make or break for him this football season here. I don't think he's going to do it. And I think he'll, like you say, if he doesn't get fired, if he have a losing season here, I think he'll resign.
Okay, and then wrapping it up, you got California and Washington State. Justin Wilcox has done a nice job at Cal, but they had a disappointing 5-win season last year, and they've only won 6 games combined the last 2 years. Actually, the record's 6-10 the last 2 years. Plummer comes in at quarterback from Purdue. They're always going to play good defense with Justin Wilcox, but the offense it's just so bland. And until he finds an offense, they're just not going to be successful at Cal.
No, it's, you go back to the Sonny Dykes years when they lit up the
Crazy,
scoreboard,
yeah.
That was exciting, but it hasn't happened here. When they hired Justin Wilcox, they knew what they got. He's a defensive genius. When he was over at Utah, outstanding job that he did right there, and it's the reason he got this head coaching position here right now. But they're going to have to, as you say, light this offense up some way, somehow, and I don't know if that's going to happen for this team this year. Jack Plummer, as you mentioned, comes in here. They're going to have to put all of everything on his shoulders here because he threw the ball for almost 400 yards a game last when his years at Purdue. But bottom line here is I think this football team is a losing team again this year, and I think it could be pressure on the head coach coming up this year. Washington State, they're bringing Cameron Ward in here. He comes in from the Incarnate Ward and from the transfer portal here.
That could be exciting.
Yes, it could be. Yes, it could be. He put up some ridiculous numbers of 77 touchdowns and 14 interceptions in 2 years. Those are really, really outstanding numbers. And they've got a head coach that's an air raid offense type head coach. So they're going to allow him to open that playbook up and be just that. Watch out for Washington State putting up some big points in some football games. If for nothing else, they'll probably be a really good over football team this year.
Yeah, similar to what happened at Western Kentucky. You've got the offensive coordinator was the guy who was the coach for the quarterback at the FCS level. So they bring the coordinator with the quarterback, and that could really work out well for Washington State. So maybe Washington State could be a sleeper in the Pac-12 in this division.
They could well be because there's going to be football teams that are going to underachieve, and if this football team surprises and plays to that offensive level, they could be just that team, that surprise team to watch in the Pac-12.
Playbook. This is the magazine you want to purchase. we've gone over how many teams are there now in college football, Mark?
131.
And we went over 131 in the last 2 days. My ass hurts. Uh, we've got to get the hell out of here. But the next time when we start showing you this magazine in the next couple of weeks, we're talking NFL. So we're going to be breaking down, previewing the NFL season. And you can get the NFL and college football, all your handicapping needs right here in the Playbook magazine guide for 2022. You can pick that up at playbooksports.com. Mark, great job as always. Glad to do this. And we'll talk to you again next week.
Hey, my pleasure as always, Greg. Great job by you as well. And we'll look forward to tearing the NFL down next week.